Hey guys, Nemo here again. Just want to say, it's been a while. Thanks for tuning in as always. And if you enjoy these stories, guys, please let me know in the comments what you think. And if you have any other great ideas, let us know. We'd love to hear your feedback. And now, as always, please enjoy the stories.
I almost didn't go, and I keep thinking about that part the most. Like if I had just stayed home, none of this would even exist in my head right now. It started normal, which is the worst part. Not even slightly weird. I met him through a friend of a friend, one of those random connections that doesn't feel important at first. His name was Aaron, and he seemed quiet in that calm, safe way, not the awkward kind. We followed each other for a few weeks, like each other's posts, nothing deep. Then one day he asked if I wanted to come over for dinner because he liked cooking and didn't trust restaurants. That actually sounded kind of sweet. Different. Not like the usual stuff where you just meet somewhere loud and pretend to hear each other. I remember thinking it felt more real. His place was a bit outside the main part of the city, in this older neighborhood where the houses all looked slightly off from each other. Not run down, just uneven, like they had been changed too many times over the years. I almost turned back when I got to his street because it was way quieter than I expected. No cars passing, no music from houses, nothing. Just this weird still feeling. But I told myself I was overthinking and walked up to his door anyway. He answered pretty quick, like he had been standing right there waiting. He smiled, same as in his pictures, and nothing about him felt wrong in that moment. If anything, I felt dumb for being nervous. The inside of his house smelled like food already, something cooked slow, like herbs and meat. It actually made me relax a bit. The place looked clean, but kind of empty, like he had just moved in or didn't care about decorating much. No clutter, no random stuff lying around. He led me into the kitchen and pointed out what he was making, moving around like he had done it 100 times. I noticed he didn't play music or turn on the TV, just silence, except for the sound of cooking. At first, I thought it was peaceful. Then it started to feel too quiet. I wandered a little while he finished up, just stepping into the hallway next to the kitchen. That's when I saw the photos. At first glance, I didn't even register what I was looking at. Just a wall covered in pictures like a college. I assumed it was family or travel or something. Then I actually looked, and it took a second for my brain to catch up. Every single photo was of me. Not selfies, not anything I had ever posted. These were taken from a distance, some blurry, some clear, all from angles I didn't recognize. There was one of me sitting at a bus stop, looking down at my phone. I remembered that day because I had missed my ride and sat there for like 20 minutes. Another one of me walking out of my school building, laughing at something, my hair tied up the way I used to wear it last year. That's when my stomach dropped. These were recent. There was a picture of me from at least 2 years ago wearing a jacket I don't even own anymore. One from a beach trip I went on with my family, and I remember that because it wasn't even in the city. I got closer without really thinking, let my body move before my brain could tell it to stop. My hands felt cold even though the house was warm. Some of the photos were taken through windows. Not like obvious ones either, slight angles, reflections in the glass. One of me sitting in my own living room, curled up on the couch with my laptop. I remember that exact night because I had stayed up late watching videos. That's when it hit me fully. These weren't random. He had been watching me. For years. I heard something behind me and turned around way too fast. He was standing at the end of the hallway, just looking at me. Not surprised, not nervous, just watching. I didn't know what my face looked like, but I could feel it, like everything had drained out a bit. He walked toward me slowly, like nothing was wrong, like I was just looking at normal pictures. I backed up without even meaning to. I noticed more details the longer I stood there. Some of the photos had dates written on the corners. Not printed, written, like he had kept track. There were hundreds of them. Maybe more. The wall went further than I thought at first, wrapping slightly into the next part of the hallway. It wasn't just a few moments. It was my life, pieces of it, things I didn't even remember until I saw them. And then I realized something worse. There were recent ones too. Like really recent. One of me from earlier that week, walking into a store near my house. Same clothes I had worn just days ago. That meant he was still doing it. Still following me. Still taking pictures. My chest felt tight, and I couldn't think straight. I remember trying to connect it all, like how did he even find me? How long had he known about me before we ever met? Because suddenly that part didn't feel real anymore. It felt planned. All of it. The follow request, the messages, the dinner. He had already known everything. I glanced past him down the hallway and saw another door slightly open. Inside, I could see more photos pinned up. Not just walls. Stacks. Boxes. Like this wasn't even all of it. I didn't wait for anything else. I just turned and walked straight back toward the front door. Not running because I didn't want to trigger anything. Just fast walking, trying to keep it together. I could feel him behind me. Not touching me. Not stopping me. Just there. That somehow made it worse. When I reached the door, I fumbled with the handle for a second because my hands wouldn't work properly. I thought for sure he was going to grab me right then. But he didn't. The door opened and I stepped outside, the cold air hitting me so hard it almost made me dizzy. I didn't look back. Not once. I walked all the way to the end of the street before I even let myself breathe properly. My heart was going crazy like it was trying to catch up with everything I had just seen. I got home and locked every door, every window, even the ones that never locked properly. I sat on my bed for hours just staring at nothing, trying to figure out how someone could know me that well without me ever noticing. The worst part didn't come until later that night. I checked my phone out of habit. There was a notification. A new message from him. No words, just a photo. It was me, standing at his front door earlier that evening, right before I knocked. Taken from inside the house. I knew something was wrong before I even sat down, that it didn't hit me properly until about 10 minutes in, and by then I was already stuck in it. The weird part is I'd almost canceled. Not for any real reason, just one of those random moods where you don't feel like meeting someone new. But she'd already picked the place, this small late-night diner on the edge of town, and I didn't want to seem flaky. When I got there, she was already inside, sitting in a booth by the window. I recognized her right away from her pictures. Same hair, same smile, just a bit quieter in real life. She waved at me before I even fully stepped in, like she had been watching the door the whole time. I sat down across from her, and for a minute everything felt normal. Like any other first date. I was a bit nervous, trying to think of something to say that didn't sound stupid. That's when it happened the first time. She laughed. Not a small laugh either. Like a full reaction, like I had just said something funny. The problem was I hadn't said anything yet. I was literally still opening my mouth. I stopped halfway through whatever I was about to say and just looked at her. She didn't explain it, didn't even act like it was strange, just smiled like nothing happened. I brushed it off at first, thought maybe I made a face or something without realizing. People laugh at random stuff sometimes. So I tried again. I started to say this dumb joke I always use when things feel awkward, something safe just to break the tension. Before I even got past the first word, she laughed again. Same kind of laugh, like she already knew the punchline. This time I didn't finish the joke. I just stared at her, waiting for her to say something. But she didn't. She just looked back at me like everything was completely fine. That's when I got uncomfortable. Not scary yet, just off. I switched topics, asked her something basic about where she grew up. She answered normally, nothing strange there. Her voice sounded calm, steady, like she had said those answers 100 times before. I relaxed a little. Then I tried to say something else, just a random comment about the place. Again, before I even finished the sentence, she laughed. Exactly at the moment where the joke would have landed. Except I hadn't said it yet. I stopped talking completely after that. I remember looking around the diner trying to ground myself. It was late enough that there were only a couple of other people there. A guy at the counter and a couple in the far booth. No one else seemed to notice anything. I looked back at her and she tilted her head slightly, like she was waiting for me to continue. I tested it. I thought of something really specific, a joke I had never said out loud before. Something kind of random about the menu having way too many options. Before I said a single word, she laughed again, exactly at the part I was about to get to. My chest felt tight after that. I didn't understand how it was possible. It wasn't like she was interrupting me mid-sentence. It was like she was reacting to something that hadn't happened yet. I tried to change the rhythm, speak faster, start talking without thinking. Didn't matter. Every time I was about to say something even slightly funny, she reacted early. Not just close. Perfect timing, like she was sensed to something ahead of me. I started paying closer attention. Her eyes. She wasn't just looking at me. She was watching me. Not in a normal way, not like someone paying attention on a date. It felt more like she was waiting for cues that hadn't happened yet. I tested it again, but differently. I thought of a joke, got ready to say it, and then didn't. She still laughed. That's when it actually scared me. Because now there was nothing to explain it. It wasn't my tone, not my body language. I hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. And she still reacted like I had. I leaned back slightly, trying to create some distance. My mind kept jumping to stupid explanations. Maybe she had heard the joke before. Maybe I was being predictable. But that didn't cover everything. There were too many times where I hadn't even started. I picked up the menu just to have something to do with my hands. I remember noticing how steady her posture was. She barely moved at all. Just small expressions, small reactions. Too consistent. I decided to stop joking completely. Just normal conversation, nothing funny. For a few minutes, it worked. No weird reactions, no early laughter. I almost convinced myself I had imagined it. Then I slipped up. I started telling a story about something that happened to me last week. It wasn't even a joke at first, just setting it up. Right before the part where it would get funny, she laughed. Again. Before I said it, I didn't finish the story. I just stopped and looked at her. This time I didn't try to hide it. She slowly stopped laughing and looked back at me, her expression changing just a little. Not confused. Not embarrassed. More like patient. Like she was waiting for me to catch up. That's when something clicked in my head that made it worse. It wasn't just that she knew what I was going to say. It felt like she had already heard it. Like this conversation had already happened for her. I started thinking about everything I had said since I sat down. Every sentence. Every reaction she had. It all lined up too cleanly, like a script she already knew. I tried one last thing. I decided I wasn't going to say anything at all. No jokes, no comments, nothing. Just silence. I sat there and looked at her. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then she smiled. And then she laughed. No reason, no trigger, just the exact same laugh she had been doing all night. My stomach dropped. Because there was nothing there for her to react to. Unless for her there was. I stood up after that. I didn't say anything, didn't explain. I just grabbed my jacket and walked out. She didn't try to stop me. I could feel her watching me as I left, the same way she had been watching me the entire time. I didn't look back. The air outside felt colder than it should have been. I walked fast, not running, just trying to get distance between me and that place. When I got home, I kept replaying it in my head, trying to find a normal explanation, something that made sense. I couldn't. Later that night, I checked my phone. There was a message from her. No text, just a voice note. I stared at it for a long time before pressing play. It was my voice, telling the joke I never actually said out loud. And right on cue, before the punchline finished, you could hear her laughing in the background. I should have left the second, he said. He didn't like crowded places. But at the time it sounded kind of refreshing, like finally someone who didn't want to sit in a loud restaurant pretending to care about overpriced food. He said he knew a spot just outside the city. Somewhere quiet, somewhere people don't really go anymore. He made it sound like this hidden view kind of thing, like one of those places you only find if someone shows you. That's what got me. It felt different from the usual first date stuff, less forced, more real. We met in a parking lot near a train station and drove together in his car. He didn't talk much at first, just pointed things out here and there. Normal stuff. Roads getting narrower, street lights fading out the further we went. I didn't think much of it because I've been to places like that before. But he kept going. At some point I checked my phone and realized I had no signal anymore. That's when I made a mental note of how long we'd been driving. It felt like way longer than he originally said. I almost brought it up, but he seemed calm, focused on the road like nothing was off. The houses started disappearing completely after a while. Just trees on both sides, thick enough that you couldn't see past them. The road itself looked older too, not broken, just unused. He finally turned off onto this smaller path that didn't even look like an official road, more like something that used to be used and then forgotten. That's when I started to feel it. Not panic, just this slow, creeping feeling that something wasn't right. He parked after a couple minutes and turned off the engine. The silence hit immediately. No distant cars, no wind, nothing. Just quiet in a way that didn't feel natural. He got out like everything was normal, so I did too. The air felt colder there, like the trees blocked everything out. I looked around expecting to see some kind of view, like a cliff or open space. Instead, I saw cars. At first, I thought it was just a few, maybe an old parking area. Then I realized how many there actually were. Dozens. They were scattered across this wide clearing, not in neat rows or anything. Just left at different angles, some closer together, some further out, like people had driven in at different times and stopped wherever they felt like. None of them looked brand new, but they weren't completely destroyed either, just abandoned. I remember thinking it was kind of strange, but also interesting. Like maybe it was one of those places people leave old cars. Then I got closer to one. That's when it changed. The driver's door was slightly open, just a crack. I looked inside without touching it. On the driver's seat, there was a phone. Not thrown there randomly. Placed. Right in the middle of the seat, screen facing up. I moved to the next car. Same thing. Not a phone this time. A wallet. Opened slightly, like it had been set down on purpose. I felt my chest tighten a bit as I kept looking. Every single car had something. A backpack, a pair of glasses, keys, a jacket folded neatly. One had a single shoe, just sitting there by itself. All in the driver's seat. All placed like someone had left it there intentionally. I turned around slowly, taking in the whole clearing again. It wasn't random. It was consistent. Every car, same pattern. One item. Driver's seat. I looked back at him. He was watching me, not moving much, just standing near his car with his hands in his pockets. I walked a bit further into the clearing, checking more cars, hoping to find one that didn't follow the pattern. There wasn't one. Some of the cars had dust on them. Others looked more recent. One still had a parking ticket stuck under the wiper like it had been there for a while, but not years. I noticed something else too. None of the items looked damaged. No signs of struggle inside the cars. No broken glass, no mess. Just empty interiors with that one thing left behind. It felt staged. Too clean to be random. I started thinking about normal explanations. Maybe it was some kind of art thing, or people dumping stuff. But that didn't explain why it was always one item, always in the same spot. And it definitely didn't explain why it felt like we weren't supposed to be there. I walked back toward him, slower this time. The silence was getting heavier the longer I stood there. I glanced at his car, then back at the others. That's when something hit me. His car was the only one without something on the driver's seat. I tried not to make it obvious that I noticed. I looked back at the cars again, counting without really meaning to. There had to be at least 30, maybe more if you went deeper into the trees. 30 cars. 30 items. 30 people. I didn't like where my thoughts were going, but I couldn't stop them. I moved toward his car casually, like I was just heading back. My heart was beating faster now, but I kept my face neutral. As I got closer, I noticed the passenger seat. There was something on it. A small object, dark, sitting right in the center. I stepped closer and realized what it was. A phone. Not his. Mine. The same case, the same small scratch near the corner from when I dropped it last month. I reached into my pocket instantly. Empty. I didn't remember taking it out. I didn't remember dropping it. I didn't remember him touching it. But there it was, placed neatly on his passenger seat. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like everything inside me just collapsed. I looked up at him slowly. He was already looking at me. Not surprised. Not confused. Just watching. The same way he had been watching since we got there. I didn't move for a second. Then I grabbed my phone and stepped back. That's when I noticed something else. The driver's seat. There was now something there too. I hadn't seen it before. I was sure of it. A single item, placed exactly like all the others. It took me a second to process what I was looking at. It was a watch. Black strap, slight scratch on the side. Mine. I don't even remember taking it off. But I knew it was mine, because I had been wearing it when I got in the car. I looked down at my wrist. Bare. That's when the panic finally hit properly. Not slow anymore, all at once. I backed away from the car, my breathing getting uneven. I didn't care about staying calm anymore. Something was very wrong. I turned toward the path we came from, already planning to just walk if I had to. But then I saw it. Another car. Parked near the edge of the clearing. I was sure it hadn't been there before. It looked newer than the others. Cleaner. The driver's door slightly open. And on the seat, just barely visible from where I stood, was something small and rectangular. Another phone. I didn't need to check to know. I could feel him watching me again as I stood there, trying to decide what to do next. I didn't say anything. I just started walking toward the path. Fast. Not running yet, but close. The silence followed me all the way back. I didn't look behind me once.
Hey guys, really sorry to disturb you, but if you're enjoying the stories up until this point, please smash that like button. That's all I'm asking for you guys. Let's break some records this year. Now back to the stories.
I didn't even want to go out that night, and I remember that part really clearly because it keeps replaying in my head like I missed something obvious. It had been one of those long days where everything just drags, and by the time evening hit, I was already drained. I almost canceled on her, but she had already made the reservation and kept texting like she was genuinely excited, so I felt bad backing out last minute. Her name, at least the one she gave me, was Leah. We had been talking for about a week, nothing intense, just normal stuff. She seemed easy to talk to, kind of sarcastic in a way that didn't feel forced. Not over the top, not trying too hard, just normal. That's what made everything later feel so off. The restaurant she picked wasn't anywhere I had been before. It was this smaller place tucked between two bigger buildings, the kind you wouldn't notice unless you were looking for it. Dim lighting, not crowded, but not empty either. Just enough people to feel like a regular night. She was already there when I walked in, sitting near the back. She waved when she saw me, smiling like she actually meant it. Nothing about her seemed strange. We sat down, started talking, and honestly it was going well. Better than I expected. Conversation didn't feel forced. No awkward pauses, no weird energy. She laughed at the right moments, asked questions, actually listened. It felt like a normal first date. That's what made it worse. About halfway through dinner, after we had already ordered and started eating, the waiter came over again. Not the same one from before. This guy looked a bit older, like he had been working there a while. He stopped at our table, looked directly at her, and said a name. Not Leah. I didn't catch it fully at first because it didn't register as important, just some random name that didn't match. But the way she reacted made it stick. She froze for a second. Not long, just enough that you'd notice if you were paying attention. Then she smiled and kind of brushed it off, like it was a simple mistake. The waiter didn't look convinced. He stared at her a bit longer than normal, like he was trying to figure something out. Then he nodded slowly and walked away. I remember thinking it was weird, but not alarming yet. People get names wrong all the time. Still, it stayed in my head. The way she paused. The way he looked at her. I tried to ignore it and keep the conversation going, but something had shifted. It wasn't obvious, just a slight change in the way she acted, a bit more controlled, like she was thinking before every response now. A few minutes later, I noticed the same waiter standing near the counter, looking over at us again. Not casually. Focused. That's when it started to feel uncomfortable. I looked back at her and she was acting normal again, or at least trying to. Smiling, talking, keeping things light. But now I was noticing small things I hadn't before. How she kept glancing toward the exit. How her hand stayed close to her lap, not moving much. It didn't match how relaxed she had been earlier. The waiter eventually came back over, but this time he didn't speak right away. He just stood there for a second, looking at her again. Then he turned slightly toward me. And that's when everything changed. He reached into his apron and pulled out a folded piece of paper. At first I thought it was a receipt or something. He unfolded it slowly and placed it on the table, closer to me than to her. I looked down without thinking. It took a second to process what I was seeing. A photo. black and white, slightly grainy, like it had been printed multiple times. It was her face. Same hair, same eyes, same expression, just a bit different lighting. Above the photo were words. Missing. And below that, a name. The same name the waiter had said earlier. Not Leah. My chest tightened instantly. I looked up at him, then at her. She wasn't looking at the paper. She was looking at me. Completely still. Not confused. Not shocked. Just watching. That's what made it hit harder. Because if this was a mistake, she would have reacted. Said something. Done anything. But she didn't. The waiter said something quietly, not loud enough for anyone else to hear. His tone wasn't aggressive, just serious. Careful. I didn't even fully process what he said because my focus was on her. She slowly reached forward and turned the paper slightly, just enough to look at it. No reaction. None. Then she looked back at him. And smiled. Not a nervous smile. Not fake. Just calm. Like she had expected this to happen eventually. The silence at the table felt heavy. I could hear other people in the restaurant, plates moving, quiet conversations, but it all felt distant. Like everything had shifted around us. I looked back down at the poster. There were details under the photo. Last seen date. Location. It wasn't old. It was recent. That meant whoever she was supposed to be had only been missing for a short time. I started thinking back through everything she had told me. Her job. Her background. The small details. None of it suddenly felt solid anymore. Like it could all be made up. The waiter didn't leave. He stayed there waiting. Not making a scene, but not backing off either. I glanced around the restaurant, wondering if anyone else had noticed. No one seemed to be paying attention. Just us. She leaned back slightly in her seat, her eyes still on me. And for the first time since I met her, something about her expression felt completely different. Not friendly. Not relaxed. Just empty. Like whatever version of her I had been talking to earlier wasn't there anymore. The waiter reached out and tapped the paper once lightly. That small movement made everything feel real in a way it hadn't before. I pushed my chair back slightly without realizing it, creating just a bit of space. She noticed. Of course she noticed. Her eyes followed the movement immediately. Still no panic. Still no explanation. Just watching. I looked back at the poster again, trying to find something that didn't match. Some difference that would prove it wasn't her. There wasn't. It was her. Exactly. Same face sitting across from me. Same face on the paper. I felt stuck. Like I couldn't move properly, couldn't think clearly. The waiter finally stepped back, but he didn't go far. Just enough to give space, but still close enough to keep watching. Like he was waiting for something to happen. I looked at her one more time. Really looked. Trying to see anything familiar from earlier. It wasn't there. Or maybe it never was. She slowly stood up. No rush. No sudden movement. Just calm. And then she walked past me. Not toward the exit. Toward the back of the restaurant. I turned in my seat to follow her with my eyes, but she disappeared behind a door before I could fully track where she went. The waiter moved immediately after that, heading in the same direction. Everything around me felt loud again all of a sudden. Plates, voices, movement. Like the world had snapped back to normal. Except it wasn't. I looked down at the paper still sitting on the table. Her face staring back at me. Different name. Same person. I didn't wait for anything else. I grabbed my jacket and left. I didn't stop walking until I was a few blocks away. Later that night, I checked my phone. There was a message from her. Still saved under the name Leah. Just one photo. It was taken from inside the restaurant. From behind me. You could see me sitting at the table looking down at the poster. And across from me, her chair was already empty. I knew I shouldn't have stayed the moment I realized I couldn't see the front door anymore, but by then it already felt like leaving wasn't something I could just do. The whole thing started off normal enough that it almost annoys me thinking back on it. He picked the place, said it was one of his favorites, nothing fancy but really good food. I checked it out online before going and it looked real, reviews and everything. Just a small restaurant tucked between other shops. When I got there, it was already dark out, and the street was quieter than I expected. Not empty, just not busy. The restaurant itself had this warm glow from inside, like the kind of place people go to relax. He was already sitting at a table when I walked in. Smiled, stood up, all the usual stuff. Nothing about him felt off. If anything, he seemed a bit too polite, like he was trying hard to make a good impression. We sat down and ordered pretty quickly. The place wasn't crowded, but there were enough people that it felt normal. I remember noticing the front door clearly when I came in. Glass panel, metal handle, you could see the street outside. That detail matters. Because later it wasn't there. At first, everything was fine. Conversation flowed, food came out, nothing weird. I actually remember thinking it was going better than most first dates. Then I mentioned I might head out a bit early because I had something the next morning. That's when he reacted. Not angry, not loud, just firm. He said I should finish my meal first. The way he said it wasn't aggressive, but it didn't feel like a suggestion either. More like a rule I hadn't realized existed until that moment. I laughed it off at first, thinking he was joking. But he didn't laugh. He just looked at me waiting. So I sat back down properly and picked up my fork again, even though I suddenly didn't feel like eating anymore. I told myself it was nothing, just a slightly awkward moment. I took a few bites, trying to get through it. That's when I noticed something small. A couple at a nearby table got up to leave. I watched them walk toward where the front door should have been. But instead of exiting, they turned slightly and disappeared past a wall. I frowned, trying to make sense of what I just saw. Maybe there was another exit I hadn't noticed. That would make sense. Except I was sure I had seen the front door when I came in. Clear as anything. I glanced over in that direction. There was no door. Just wall. Same color as the rest of the place, nothing marking where a door used to be. I stared at it longer than I probably should have, trying to figure out if I had just remembered wrong. Maybe I came in through a side entrance. Maybe I wasn't paying attention, but that didn't feel right. I know what I saw. I looked back at him. He was watching me again. Not eating much, just picking at his food. Waiting. I forced myself to eat a bit more, even though my appetite was gone. I kept glancing around, trying to get a sense of the layout. There were other people still eating, still talking, acting like everything was completely normal. No one else seemed confused. I spotted another door further back, near what looked like the restrooms. That had to be it. An exit. I told myself I'd just finish a bit more, then get up and leave. No big deal. A few minutes passed, and I saw someone else stand up. This time I paid closer attention. They walked toward the back, toward that second door. But before they reached it, a server stepped in front of them, said something I couldn't hear, and gently guided them back to their table. They didn't argue. They just went back and sat down, like it was normal. That's when the feeling really started to settle in. Something wasn't right. I put my fork down and leaned back slightly. I told him I was done eating. He shook his head. Not harshly, just certain. Like that wasn't an option. I felt this tightness in my chest, like the room had gotten smaller somehow. I looked around again. The back door I had seen earlier, gone. Not covered. Not hidden. Just not there anymore. In its place was another table. People sitting at it, eating like nothing had changed. I blinked a few times trying to process it. I knew for a fact that door had been there minutes ago. I wasn't imagining that. I looked at the walls, the layout, trying to find any sign of an exit. There weren't any. Just more tables. More people. All of them staying seated. All of them eating. I started noticing something else too. The plates. Every table had full meals, or partially eaten ones, but no empty plates. No finished meals. Like no one ever actually left. My heart started beating faster. I pushed my chair back slightly, ready to stand up anyway. He leaned forward just a bit. Didn't touch me. Didn't raise his voice. But the look he gave me made me stop. Not angry. Not threatening. Just certain. Like he already knew what would happen if I tried. I sat there for a second, frozen. Then I looked down at my plate. It didn't look like I had eaten as much as I thought. In fact, it looked almost untouched. Even though I remembered taking multiple bites. I picked up my fork again, my hand feeling slightly shaky now. I took another bite. It tasted the same. Normal. But something about it felt off. Like it wasn't actually going anywhere. I glanced at the tables around me again. People were eating slowly, methodically. No one rushing. No one stopping. I noticed one guy a few tables over. He looked tired. Like really tired. But he kept eating anyway. Small bites. Over and over. His plate looked exactly the same as when I first noticed him. Not getting emptier. Just staying full. I looked back at mine. Same thing. No matter how much I'd ate, it didn't seem to change. That's when it hit me. You don't leave until you finish. But finishing wasn't possible. I felt this wave of panic rise up, stronger than before. I stood up this time, not caring anymore. I turned in a full circle, scanning for anything that looked like a way out. Nothing. Just walls. Tables. People eating. I could feel eyes on me now. Not just his. Others too. Like they were all noticing me standing. Not in a helpful way. More like I was doing something wrong. I sat back down slowly. My breathing uneven now. I looked at him again. He finally picked up his fork and took another bite. Calm. Patient. Like he had all the time in the world. I looked down at my plate again. Still full. Exactly the same. I don't know how long I sat there after that. Time felt weird. Like it wasn't moving properly. I kept eating. Because I didn't know what else to do. Every time I looked up, the room felt slightly different. Tables shifting. People changing. But always the same pattern. No one leaving. No exits. Just eating. At some point, I checked my phone on the table. No signal. No time displayed. Just a blank screen. I looked back up one more time, hoping something would be different. It wasn't. Same table. Same plate. Same man sitting across from me watching. Waiting. I looked down again. The food was still there. Untouched. Like I had never taken a single bite. I didn't notice anything wrong with me until she showed me that photo, and that's the part that keeps bothering me the most, because it means something had already changed before I even realized it. We met late, like properly late, because she said she preferred the city at night. Less crowded, more real, that kind of thing. I didn't think much of it. It actually sounded kind of nice at the time. We ended up walking more than anything. Not sitting down somewhere straight away, just moving through different streets, passing closed shops, and quiet corners that still had lights on. It felt different from a normal date, but not in a bad way. She talked a lot at first. Random stuff, nothing deep. I remember noticing how easy it was to keep up with her, like she didn't leave space for awkward silence. We eventually stopped at this small overlook near a canal. It wasn't a big tourist spot or anything, just a railing and a view of the water with reflections from streetlights stretching across it. No one else was around. That's where things started to feel slightly off. Not scary, just small details that didn't sit right if you paid attention too long. Like how still everything was. No wind, no sound from the water. Even the reflections didn't move the way they should have. I leaned on the railing for a bit, looking out, trying to relax into it. She stood next to me, close enough that our shoulders almost touched, but not quite. I remember glancing at her reflection in the water. It looked normal. Then I looked at mine. It felt delayed. Like when I moved slightly, the reflection didn't match right away. Just a fraction off, but enough to notice. I blinked and looked back at the actual water. It looked fine again. I told myself it was just the lighting. That's when she pulled out her phone. She said she wanted to take a picture of us, something to remember the night. That didn't seem weird. People do that all the time. I stepped closer to her, leaning in slightly so we both fit in the frame. She held the phone up, angled it, and for a second I saw the screen. Both of us were there. Normal. She took the picture. I heard the click. Everything still felt fine at that exact moment. Then she lowered the phone and looked at it, and she smiled. Not a big smile, just this quiet, satisfied one. She turned the screen toward me so I could see it. That's when my stomach dropped. She was in the photo. Clear. Perfect. Standing exactly where she had been. But where I was supposed to be, there was nothing. Not a blur. Not a shadow. Just empty space. Like no one had been standing there at all. I stared at it for a few seconds, trying to process what I was looking at. It didn't make sense. I reached for my phone almost automatically. I opened the camera and turned it on. Front facing. I was there. My face. Normal. I moved slightly, checked again. Still there. I took a quick photo just to be sure. Looked at it. Normal. Everything exactly how it should be. I looked back at her phone. Same picture. Same empty space where I had been. I felt this pressure building in my chest, like something wasn't lining up and my brain couldn't fix it. I stepped back slightly, putting a bit of distance between us. She didn't move. Just watched me. Still holding the phone. I tried to laugh it off in my head, thinking maybe it was some kind of glitch or weird angle. I told myself to test it again. So I asked her to take another one. She raised the phone again, same position, same framing. This time I watched the screen more carefully. I could see myself. Right there next to her. No problem. She took the picture. Lowered the phone. Turned it toward me again. Same result. She was there. I wasn't. Not even a hint of me. It looked like she had taken a picture alone. I felt cold all of a sudden, even though the air hadn't changed. I looked around quickly, like somehow the environment would explain it. But everything was the same. Still quiet. Still empty. I checked my reflection again in the water. This time it was worse. I could see her reflection clearly, standing next to me. But where I should have been, there was just a break in the light. Like something was missing from the scene. I moved my arm slightly, watching carefully. The water didn't react. No movement from where I should be. I looked down at myself. My hands were still there. My body still there. I could feel everything. But somehow it wasn't showing up where it should. I stepped away from the railing completely. The feeling in my chest got tighter. Like something was slowly disconnecting. I pulled out my phone again and opened the camera. Still there. Still normal. But now I noticed something small. When I moved, the image on my screen lagged slightly. Just a fraction. Like it wasn't fully keeping up with me. I turned the phone sideways, then back again. The delay got worse for a second before snapping back. I looked up at her. She was still watching me the same way. Calm. Interested. Like she was waiting for me to notice something specific. I stepped further back. Another step. Creating more space between us. The distance felt wrong somehow, like it stretched more than it should have. I looked around again, tried to ground myself. The buildings nearby looked slightly off now. Not in shape. In position. Like they had shifted just a bit compared to where they were earlier. I looked back at her. She hadn't moved. But she felt further away now. Even though I had only taken a couple of steps. I checked my phone again. This time, when I opened the camera, it took a second longer to show anything. Then the image appeared. But it wasn't centered right. I was partially out of frame even though I was holding the phone straight. I adjusted it. The image didn't fully follow. Like it was struggling to track me. I lowered the phone slowly. My hands felt colder now. Less steady. I looked back at her one more time. She lifted her phone again. Not asking this time. Just doing it. She aimed it at me. I didn't move. I just stood there. She took another photo. Then another. Each time, that same quiet smile. She walked a step closer and turned the screen toward me again. This time there were multiple photos. In every single one, she was standing alone. Different angles. Different moments. No sign of me anywhere. I felt this drop in my stomach that didn't go away. Like something had already happened and I was just catching up to it. I looked down at my hands again. Still there. But they didn't feel as solid as before. Like they were slightly out of place. I took a step back again. Then another. The distance between us stretched even more. She didn't follow. She just stood there by the railing, still, holding the phone, watching. I turned around after that. I didn't say anything. I just started walking back the way we came. The streets looked different now. Not completely unfamiliar, just slightly wrong. Like I was walking through a version of the same place. I kept moving anyway. Faster now. I pulled out my phone one last time while walking. Opened the camera. It took longer to load this time. Then the screen came on. The street behind me was visible. The lights, the buildings, everything. Except me. I wasn't there. I didn't notice it all at once, and that's what makes it worse, because it means it was happening for a while before I caught on. At first, it just felt like one of those slightly awkward first dates where you think people might be glancing over for no reason. The kind where you tell yourself you're just being self-conscious. The cafe he picked was small, but not empty. It had that cozy look from the outside, warm lights, fogged-up windows, the kind of place that feels safe when you walk in from the cold. I remember thinking it was actually a good choice. He was already inside when I got there, sitting at a corner table with his back to the wall. That meant he could see the whole room, which I didn't think about at the time. I sat across from him, ordered something simple, and we started talking. He was easy enough to talk to, kind of quiet, but not in a weird way. Just calm, observant. That word fits better now. The place had maybe 10 other people inside. A couple by the window, 2 girls sharing a table near the counter, someone alone with a laptop, and a few others scattered around. Normal mix. I didn't pay much attention to them at first. Why would I? It started small. I noticed the guy with the laptop looking up more often than normal. Not just quick glances, but longer looks, like he was trying to listen in. I ignored it. Then one of the girls near the counter turned in her seat slightly. Not enough to be obvious, just enough that her line of sight included our table. Again, I ignored it. People look around. It happens. I kept talking, trying to stay focused on the date. Then I realized something. Every time I looked up, someone was already looking at me. Not looking away quickly like they got caught. Just looking. Holding it for a second too long before going back to whatever they were doing. It didn't feel random anymore. It felt timed. Like they were taking turns. I shifted in my seat, trying to break the feeling. I picked up my drink, took a sip, looked out at the table for a bit longer than I needed to. When I looked up again, the guy with the laptop was staring directly at me. No hesitation. No pretending. Just watching. I looked away first. That's when I started paying real attention. I scanned the room slowly, pretending I was just looking around casually. Every single person had done it at least once. Turned slightly. Paused. Watched me. It wasn't constant. That's what made it worse. It was controlled. Like they were trying not to make it obvious. I looked back at him. He hadn't reacted at all. Still calm, still sitting the same way, still watching me in that quiet way he had from the start. I tried to bring it up casually, like it wasn't a big deal. I asked if he knew anyone here. He didn't answer right away. He just looked at me for a second longer than normal. Then he leaned forward slightly. That's when he said it. Quiet. Almost like it wasn't meant to be heard by anyone else. They're deciding if you're worth keeping. I didn't react properly at first. It didn't land right away. It sounded like a joke. A weird one, but still. So I gave a small laugh, expecting him to smile or explain. He didn't. He just leaned back again and picked up his drink. Like he had just stated something normal. That's when it hit me. He wasn't joking. I felt my chest tighten, like the air in the cafe had gotten heavier. I looked around again faster this time. Now that I knew what to look for, it was obvious. The way people paused their conversations at the same time. The way their eyes moved back to me in short intervals. The way no one ever fully turned their back toward our table. Even the staff. The person behind the counter kept glancing over, not even trying to hide it. I leaned closer to him, keeping my voice low even though I wasn't saying anything out loud yet. I asked what he meant. He didn't answer right away. He just watched me for a moment, like he was studying my reaction. Then he gave a small nod, almost to himself. that made it worse. Because it felt like he was confirming something, not explaining it, confirming it. I felt this urge to stand up and leave immediately. But something stopped me. Not physically. Just the awareness that every single person in that room was already focused on me. Standing up would make it obvious. And for some reason, that felt like the wrong move. I looked down at the table, trying to think. My hands didn't feel steady anymore. I could feel the weight of their attention now, even when I wasn't looking at them. Like it was pressing in from all sides. I glanced up again. The couple by the window had stopped talking completely. Both of them looking at me now. Not even pretending anymore. Just watching. I looked at the two girls near the counter. Same thing. Their conversation paused. Eyes on me. The guy with the laptop had closed it. Just sitting there. Looking. I turned back to him. He still looked calm. Unbothered. Like this was normal for him. Like he had seen this happen before. I realized then that he had picked this place for a reason. This wasn't random. None of it was. I tried to steady my breathing, keep myself from panicking. I thought about just getting up and walking out anyway. But I couldn't see the door clearly anymore. Not because it was gone. Just because every time I tried to focus on it, someone moved slightly, blocking my line of sight. Not obvious movements. Small ones. Just enough. Like they didn't want me to have a clear path. I looked back at him again. He tilted his head slightly, studying me. Then he glanced around the room briefly. Not in confusion. More like checking in. A few of the people nodded. Actually nodded. Subtle. But I saw it. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just him. It was all of them. I leaned back in my chair, trying to create space, even though it didn't help. The room felt smaller now. Tighter. Like the walls had moved in without me noticing. I looked down at my phone under the table. No signal. I didn't even remember losing it. I typed out a message anyway, just in case. It didn't send. Of course it didn't. I looked up again. Everyone was still watching. Not constantly, but enough. Enough that I couldn't ignore it anymore. I turned back to him one last time, trying to understand what was happening. He leaned forward slightly again. Not close enough to be threatening. Just enough to keep it between us. He didn't repeat what he said before. He didn't need to. The way he looked at me said the rest. Like he was waiting for the result. Not controlling it. Just part of it. I sat there, frozen, not sure what to do next. Then slowly one of the people near the back stood up. Not in a rush. Just calmly. They started walking toward our table. Then another person stood up. And another. Not all at once. One by one. Until the entire cafe was moving. All of them heading in the same direction. Toward me. I didn't wait after that. I pushed my chair back hard and stood up, not caring anymore. I moved fast toward where I thought the door was. People shifted as I moved, not blocking me directly, but not making it easy either. I kept going. Didn't stop. Didn't look back. I reached the front of the cafe and found the door. Still there. I grabbed the handle and pulled it open. Cold air hit me immediately. I stepped outside and kept walking. Didn't stop until I was far enough away that I couldn't see the place anymore. Later that night, I checked my phone again. The message I tried to send earlier had gone through, but there was a reply. From an unknown number. Just one line. Not this time. I didn't realize what was wrong at first. I just felt it. Like something was slightly off, but I couldn't place it. And that almost made it worse because I kept trying to ignore it instead of just leaving. We met at this late-night dessert place that stays open way past normal hours. Bright lights, glass display, way too many options you don't actually need. It felt safe, like the kind of place where nothing weird happens. She was already sitting when I got there, facing the entrance. That meant the first thing I saw when I walked in was her looking straight at me. Not unusual. But the way she held eye contact was. I remember thinking she just had strong eye contact, like some people do when they're confident. It didn't feel creepy right away, just a bit intense. I sat down across from her and we started talking. Normal stuff. Where we're from, random stories, nothing serious. But something kept pulling my attention back to her eyes. I couldn't figure out why at first. Then it clicked. She hadn't blinked. Not once. I tried to tell myself I just missed it. People blink all the time without you noticing. So I stopped focusing on it for a bit, tried to just act normal. We ordered, waited for the food, kept talking. I watched her more carefully this time. Still nothing. Her eyes stayed open the entire time. No flicker, no quick blink, nothing. It started to get distracting. Like I couldn't focus on anything else because my brain kept waiting for it to happen. I even tried blinking on purpose just to reset the feeling. Didn't help. She was still staring, still talking like everything was normal. The weird part was her eyes didn't even look dry. No redness, no watering. Just steady. Too steady. I started timing it in my head without meaning to. 30 seconds. A minute. Longer. Still nothing. At some point I realized I hadn't seen her blink since I walked in. That's when it started to feel wrong. Not just unusual. Wrong. I glanced around the place to distract myself. Other people were there, talking, eating, moving normally. Blinking. Everyone else looked normal. I looked back at her. Same position. Same steady gaze. It felt like she wasn't reacting naturally to anything. Even when she laughed, her eyes stayed exactly the same. That part got to me, because people's eyes change when they laugh. Hers didn't. I tried to keep the conversation going, but it started to feel forced on my end. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept waiting for that one blink that would prove I was overthinking. It didn't come. Eventually, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I pointed it out. Not in a serious way, more like joking, trying to make it less weird than it felt. The moment I said it, she went completely still. Not just her eyes. Everything. Like she paused. Then slowly she leaned forward slightly. Closer to me. That's when she blinked. But it wasn't a normal blink. It didn't close from top to bottom. Her eyelids moved sideways, from the sides of her eyes toward the center, like something sliding shut horizontally instead of vertically. It happened slowly enough that I could actually see it. Skin folding in from both sides, meeting in the middle, then opening again the same way. I froze. I didn't react properly. I just stared, because my brain couldn't process what I had just seen. That's not how eyes work. It didn't look fake. It didn't look like a trick. It looked natural. Like that's how her eyes were supposed to move. She leaned back again after that, like nothing had happened. Like she just blinked normally. My chest felt tight. I didn't know what to do. I looked around again, almost hoping someone else had seen it. No one reacted. Everyone's still doing their own thing. Like nothing strange had happened. I looked back at her. She was watching me again. Same steady gaze. But now it felt completely different. Now I knew something was actually wrong. I tried to keep myself calm. Tried to act like I hadn't just seen that. But my body wasn't cooperating. My hands felt colder. My breathing uneven. I picked up my drink just to have something to do. My hand shook slightly. I set it back down quickly. She didn't say anything about it. Just kept watching. I noticed something else then. Her eyes weren't just not blinking. They weren't moving much either. No small shifts, no quick glances. Just locked on me. Like I was the only thing in the room. I leaned back slightly, creating some distance. Her gaze followed instantly. Perfectly. No delay. I felt this pressure building, like I needed to get out of there. But I didn't want to cause a scene. Not yet. I told myself to wait a bit, find a normal moment to leave. I tried to look at the menu again, pretending to consider ordering something else. When I looked back up, she was closer. Not by much, but enough that I knew she had moved. I hadn't seen her move. That part stuck with me. I would have noticed, but I didn't. I swallowed hard, trying to keep it together. I glanced at her eyes again, still open, still unblinking. Then slowly, without me saying anything this time, she blinked again. sideways, faster this time, like she was getting used to it. I felt this wave of panic hit properly then. Not just discomfort, actual fear. I pushed my chair back slightly, not standing yet, just preparing. Her head tilted slightly, like she was studying me. Then she blinked again, sideways, quick, too quick, like it was becoming more natural, or maybe it always was. I stood up after that. Didn't care about timing anymore. Didn't care about being polite. I just needed to leave. She didn't try to stop me. Didn't reach out. Didn't react at all. She just stayed seated watching me. I turned and walked toward the exit. Fast. Not running, but close. I could feel her gaze on me the entire time. I pushed a door open and stepped outside. The air hit me hard. I kept walking. Didn't stop. Didn't look back. Not until I reached the end of the street. Then I turned slightly, just enough to see the front of the place. She was standing inside near the window, looking out, directly at me. Even from that distance, I could tell. Her eyes were still open, still fixed, still not blinking. Then slowly I saw it again, from across the street. Her eyelids sliding sideways, closing, opening. And this time, I realized something worse. There were more folds than there should be. Like her eyes weren't meant to close just once. I didn't notice the second plate at first, which sounds stupid now, but it just blended in like everything was normal. And I think that's why it took me so long to realize what was actually happening. The restaurant was louder than I expected, one of those places where the noise kind of covers everything else. People talking over each other, plates clinking, music low in the background, but not low enough to ignore. It felt busy in a comfortable way. He picked it. Said he liked places with energy, said quiet places felt weird to him. That should have been the first thing that stuck out, but it didn't. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table for two near the middle of the room. Nothing unusual about that. I sat down across from him, put my phone on the table, and we started talking like normal. He seemed relaxed. More relaxed than most people on a first date, like he wasn't trying to impress me or anything, just settled. A server came over pretty quickly to take our order. I told him what I wanted. Then he ordered. For both of us. I remember thinking it was a bit strange, but not enough to say anything. Some people do that, try to take control in a confident way. I figured maybe he just thought it was a nice gesture. But then the server repeated the order back. 2 meals. 2 drinks. I glanced at him, expecting him to correct it. He didn't. He just nodded. The server walked away. I laughed it off in my head, thinking maybe he was just really hungry or planning to share. That made sense. At least for a few minutes. The drinks came first. 2 glasses. They were placed carefully on the table. One in front of me. One in the empty seat across from him. Not next to him. Across from him. I noticed that. I watched him as the server left. He picked up his glass. Then, without saying anything, he shifted his gaze slightly. Not at me. To the side. Toward the empty chair. Like someone was sitting there. I followed his eyes without meaning to. There was nothing there. Just the chair. Empty. I looked back at him. He took a sip of his drink like everything was normal. I picked mine up, trying to ignore it. Telling myself I was reading too much into a small thing. The food came next. 2 plates. Placed the same way. One in front of me. One in front of the empty seat. I felt that same small twist in my stomach again. The server didn't hesitate. Didn't question it. Just set everything down and left. I looked at the second plate. Full meal. Steaming. Exactly like mine. I glanced back at him. He had already started eating. Normal. Calm. Like there wasn't anything strange about what was happening. I tried to keep up the conversation, but it felt harder now. My attention kept drifting to that empty seat. The plate sitting there untouched. I noticed something else then. The chair wasn't pushed in all the way. It was slightly pulled out. Like someone had just sat down. I hadn't seen anyone sit there. No one had walked up. I was sure of that. The space between us wasn't big enough to miss it. I shifted in my seat, leaning slightly to the side, trying to get a different angle. Still nothing. Just empty space. I looked back at him. He was watching me again. Not directly. Just from the corner of his eye. Like he knew exactly what I was thinking. I picked up my fork and took a bite, trying to focus on something normal. The food tasted fine. That almost made it worse. Because everything else didn't feel fine. A few minutes passed like that. Me eating slowly. Him eating normally. The second plate still untouched. Then he did something that made my chest tighten. He reached forward. Not toward me. Toward the empty seat. And he adjusted the position of the plate slightly. Like making room. Like someone had moved it. I froze for a second, watching. There was no one there. Nothing to interact with. But he acted like there was. He pulled his hand back and continued eating. I looked around the restaurant quickly, hoping someone else had noticed. No one was paying attention. Everyone just doing their own thing. I looked back at the empty seat again. For a split second, I thought I saw something. Not a full shape. Just a distortion. Like heat in the air. Barely there. Then it was gone. I blinked a few times, trying to reset my vision. Nothing. Just a chair. I told myself it was my imagination. It had to be. I looked back at him, ready to say something. But before I could, he did it again. He paused. Looked at the empty seat. And nodded. Like he was responding to something. I didn't hear anything. No voice. No movement. Just him reacting. I felt that tightness in my chest getting worse. Like the air was getting harder to breathe. I put my fork down. I couldn't keep pretending this was normal. I leaned back slightly, creating space. He noticed. Of course he noticed. His eyes shifted toward me. Then back to the empty seat. Then back to me. Like comparing. That's what it felt like. Comparing. I glanced at the second plate again. Something had changed. I was sure of it. The food looked slightly disturbed. Not a lot. Just enough that it didn't look untouched anymore. A piece moved. A small gap where there hadn't been one before. I stared at it, trying to convince myself I was wrong. That it had always looked like that. But I knew it hadn't. I knew it. I looked up at him again. He was smiling now. Not wide. Just a small, satisfied smile. He reached for his drink again, then paused, looked to the empty seat, and gently pushed the second glass closer to it, like offering it. My heart started beating faster. I stood up. I didn't care about being subtle anymore. I just needed to get out. As I stood, I glanced down at the chair one more time, and this time I saw it properly. Not clearly. Not fully. But enough. A shape. Sitting. The outline of something where there should have been nothing. Distorting the light behind it. Like a present that didn't fully belong. I stepped back quickly, my chair scraping against the floor. He didn't react. He just stayed seated. Calm. Watching. I turned and started walking toward the exit. Fast. I could feel something behind me. Not touching me. Just there. Close. Matching my pace. I didn't look back. I pushed through the door and got outside. The noise of the restaurant cut off instantly. I kept walking. Didn't stop. Didn't turn around. Not until I was far enough away. When I finally looked back, I could see through the window. He was still sitting at the table, facing forward. And across from him, the chair wasn't empty anymore. Something was sitting there, still, watching him. And on the table there were now 3 plates. I thought the night was going great at first, which makes it worse looking back. She picked a quiet little bistro tucked behind a street that barely anyone noticed. Dim lights, mismatched chairs, the kind of place where it feels like no one could ever find you if you didn't want them to. It sounded perfect. I liked quiet. Thought it would be easy to talk, maybe laugh without everyone eavesdropping. She was already at the table when I got there, flipping through the menu slowly, and I remember thinking she seemed almost too calm. Like she owned the whole place just by being there. Her smile when she saw me made me think everything was normal, like first date normal, but I should have paid attention to the way her eyes didn't dart anywhere, how they stayed fixed on me, calm and patient, almost waiting. We ordered some food and started talking. It was easy at first, the usual getting to know you stuff, except she kept circling back to this thing about relationships. She talked about stability, commitment, really long-term stuff. I laughed at some of it in that half-nervous way you do when you're trying to impress someone. She smiled, but didn't laugh, not like a normal person would, just kept staring. After dinner, she suggested we go to her place. I hesitated for a moment. First date, moving too fast. But she had this way of making it feel casual, like it wasn't a big deal. I thought, okay, maybe I can meet her pet or see where she live. That's when I first noticed the weird smell, faint at first, something chemical and sweet, almost like flowers, but not quite. I didn't think much of it at the time. Her apartment was on the top floor of an old building. Narrow hallway, peeling paint, the smell stronger now. I started feeling uneasy, but I didn't want to seem rude. She offered to make tea. I followed her down the hallway, past the living room, and that's when she opened a door that I didn't even know existed. It was small at first, almost like a closet. Then the lights hit me, and my stomach dropped. It wasn't a closet. It was a room, a huge one, lined wall to wall with glass cases. I froze before I even fully understood what I was seeing. Each case had a figure inside, preserved somehow. Sitting upright, eyes closed. Skin pale, hair perfectly arranged. Some were smiling, some just still. I stepped closer, heart racing. The smell hit fully now, that sickly sweet chemical odor. I realized it was coming from the cases, from whatever she'd used to preserve them. I couldn't breathe properly, couldn't move, couldn't speak. I didn't know what to say, if I even should. I kept looking at them, trying to process. And that's when she said it. Not loud, not like she was yelling, just calm, matter of fact. She loves long-term relationships. That's why she keeps them. That's why they're still here. I stumbled backward a step, my mind racing. My hands shook. I tried to make sense of it. Tried to tell myself this couldn't be real. But it was. Every case perfectly intact. Every figure completely human, down to the tiny details. I realized some of them looked really familiar, like people I might have seen online once or twice, and my stomach twisted at the thought. She came closer, her shoes clicking softly on the floor. Calm, patient, watching me like I was a project, like I was supposed to admire her collection or understand it, or something worse. I felt like my body was moving slow, like someone had slowed the world down so I could really see everything I shouldn't. I tried to ask questions, but my voice failed me. Couldn't come out right. Couldn't even form a full thought without it catching in my throat. She walked between the cases, touching the glass lightly, showing me the figures as if she was proud, like she was showing me her trophies. Each one different, some older, some newer, some almost too fresh. I looked for a phone or something to call for help. Nothing. My pockets had my keys, wallet, phone, but it felt like I couldn't reach them. My hands shook too much. She must have noticed, because she stopped in front of me and smiled, tilted her head just slightly, like she was considering something. Then she motioned for me to come closer, like I was supposed to step into the room. My mind screamed at me to leave, but my body didn't obey fast enough. I shuffled back instead, hitting the edge of one of the cases. A sharp knock echoed, and she didn't react. Not annoyed, not startled, just calm, steady waiting. I realized then that she probably never had visitors in this room before. No one who came close enough to see all of it. And it was obvious she didn't plan to stop me from leaving, or maybe she did, in a way I didn't understand yet. I moved slowly toward the door, keeping my eyes on her. She didn't follow. Just stayed there, hand on one of the cases, watching me like she was measuring something, deciding something. The room felt alive, or maybe it was just my panic making it feel that way. The figures in the cases seemed to watch me too, eyes closed but somehow aware. I reached the door, my hand shaking as I gripped the knob. I twisted it, barely breathing, and pulled it open. The hallway hit me, a familiar smell of old paint and carpet, and I ran. I didn't look back until I was downstairs, out on the street, the cool night air hitting my face like a slap. I kept walking fast until the building was far behind me. I didn't stop until I reached a busy street, lights and people moving normally, blinking, laughing, alive. I couldn't get that image out of my head. Every case, every figure, the way she had spoken about them like they were still partners, still present, still hers. Later, I tried to text a friend about it, but the words didn't feel real even as I typed them. I thought about going back with someone else, but I couldn't. I couldn't even imagine entering that hallway again, stepping past that smell, seeing those eyes close forever. I don't know if she ever noticed how terrified I was, or if she thought I understood the beauty of it, her perfect long-term relationships preserved and lined up, waiting for attention. I don't know if she's still collecting. I hope not. I hope someone else warned people before me. I never went on another date after that. Not for a long time. Not in a building I couldn't see the back of. Not with someone who smiles too calmly, who measures things too carefully. I don't know if anyone else will find the room. I don't know if she even remembers me. But I remember her, and I remember the cases. Every single one. I knew the date was off from the second I sat down, but I didn't want to admit it to myself. The restaurant looked normal enough. Dim lights, old wooden tables, that slightly sticky floor you only notice after a while. He was talking a mile a minute about work, hobbies, his cat, stuff I didn't care about, and I tried to laugh, nod, act like I was engaged. But there was this tension I couldn't shake, like my brain was running ahead of me, warning me about something I couldn't see yet. At some point, I felt I needed a break. Just a moment away to collect myself, maybe scroll through my phone, something to calm my nerves. I told him I'd be right back and stood, leaving my water untouched. The hallway to the bathroom was narrow, with cracked tiles and dim fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. That kind of flicker that makes everything look older than it should. I passed a couple of empty tables in the hallway section and almost laughed at myself for being jumpy. When I stepped into the bathroom, it smelled faintly of bleach and damp hair, but beneath it was something else. Something faint, metallic maybe. I shook my head and approached the mirror over the sink. That's when I saw it. At first I thought it was a weird reflection, like condensation forming in strange patterns. Then I noticed the words. They were scratched into the surface of the mirror. Hundreds of them, overlapping, scrawled in different directions, almost like someone had tried to make sure you couldn't read just one without seeing the rest. The message was the same in all of them. Don't trust him. My stomach twisted, and I stepped back. My first thought was prank. Maybe the bathroom staff had written it there as some weird joke. But it didn't look fresh. The scratches caught the light in a way that made them seem etched into the glass permanent. I ran my fingers over the surface lightly and felt the tiny ridges. Real. Someone had done this intentionally. I backed up against the wall and tried to steady my breathing. My phone was in my pocket. I considered taking a picture. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was just a coincidence, something meant to scare people, but not really a warning. But my gut screamed at me that it wasn't a coincidence. I turned slightly, hoping maybe someone else would be there. Empty. Silent. The buzzing from the fluorescent lights filled the bathroom completely. I noticed a faint smear on the counter, like someone had pressed their hand there in a rush. It wasn't fresh, but it was recent enough that it made my skin crawl. I glanced at the stalls and considered hiding in one just to think, but no, I couldn't. I felt trapped, but the room itself was pressing down on me, small and claustrophobic even though it wasn't that tiny. My eyes went back to the mirror. Don't trust him. Repeated over and over in sharp, uneven letters, almost like the mirror itself was screaming. I ran my hand through my hair and tried to think. What did this mean? Was it him? Could it be someone else warning me? Was this some elaborate joke? None of it made sense. My heart was racing, but I forced myself to calm down. Logic, I told myself. Logic. Someone probably just scratched it in and it had nothing to do with me. I splashed some water on my face, hoping to reset my nerves. And that's when I noticed another detail. The scratches weren't random. Some were deeper, fresher than others, and they seemed to be layered over older scratches. Like someone had been writing the same message repeatedly over time. I ran my fingers along one of the deeper marks and felt the uneven edges. Sharp. Intentionally sharp. I knew I needed to leave the bathroom. Back in the main room, he was sitting at the table, scrolling through his phone, looking exactly the same as when I left. Calm. Normal. Smiling when I came back. But I couldn't shake the image of that mirror, those etched words burning in my head. I sat down, pretending nothing had happened, but I couldn't eat. Every bite felt like lead in my stomach. Every glance toward him made my chest tighten. My eyes kept drifting back to the bathroom door, half expecting someone, or him, to come out, to say something, to notice I had seen it. But the restaurant was oblivious. The other diners didn't see anything unusual. Everything looked normal. I tried talking again, but my voice sounded hollow. He smiled, leaned back, and I realized I had no idea what he was thinking. Nothing gave him away. No flicker of emotion, no nervous glance, nothing. He seemed perfectly ordinary, perfectly human, perfectly normal. That was worse. That was what scared me. After a while, I excused myself again. This time I wasn't going to the bathroom. I needed air. I needed to think. I walked out into the alley behind the restaurant. The night was cold. The air sharpened my lungs. I tried to make sense of what I had seen. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. I thought about calling someone, but what would I say? Someone scratched a warning into a mirror. Who would believe that? I felt completely alone, like no one could help me with this. After a few minutes, I forced myself back inside, trying to act casual. He didn't notice anything. Everything continued like nothing had happened. Dinner ended normally, the server brought the check, and I paid, all while my mind replayed that mirror over and over. Don't trust him. Don't trust him. Every scratch burned into my memory, every jagged line screaming silently. We left the restaurant together, and I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to walk away, to run to get as far from him as possible. But my instincts were muddled by confusion, by shock, by disbelief. He walked beside me, smiling, talking about some movie or TV show I didn't care about. I nodded along, my mind somewhere else entirely. By the time we parted, I was shaking. My legs felt weak. I told myself it was just nerves, just first date awkwardness, but the words from the mirror wouldn't leave me. I kept thinking about how someone had gone to the trouble to etch that warning over and over, layering fresh scratches on top of older ones, and I couldn't stop picturing it. I left the area as quickly as I could, walking fast, feeling exposed and watched. The restaurant faded behind me, but the mirror stayed. The sharp edges, the overlapping messages, the repeated warning. I felt like I could still hear it even as I moved farther away, like it had embedded itself in my mind. When I finally stopped, I tried to shake it off. I tried to convince myself it was coincidence, a strange prank, a fluke. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I knew someone or something wanted me to see that, wanted me to know. And when I thought about him, walking calmly beside me, perfectly normal, I felt a chill I couldn't explain. I never went on another date for a long time after that. I couldn't stop replaying it in my head. The mirror, the words, the sharp edges, and that calm, normal smile he wore like nothing was wrong. I kept wondering if someone else had seen it before me, if anyone else had been warned. I hoped they had. I hoped someone had listened. But for me, there was only one thing I knew for sure. The next time I saw him, I would remember. Don't trust him. I should have noticed something was off the moment I walked into that little Italian place on 7th Street. Not the decor, not the menu, nothing like that. It was the way he smiled when he saw me, the way he acted like the entire restaurant was waiting just for us. I laughed it off at first, thinking it was just charm, but looking back, I realized charm isn't supposed to make the room feel frozen. We sat down at a corner table, the kind tucked against a wall with a tiny candle flickering in the middle. I pulled out my phone automatically, checking the time because I'm always worried about being late, and it said 6:17. That shouldn't have been normal, but then I looked again a few minutes later, just to double check, and it said 6:17 again. I assumed it glitched. Phone to bed sometimes, I told myself. The night started out okay. We ordered some pasta and wine, talked a little about work, hobbies, where we live, the usual first date chatter. But every time I glanced at my phone, the time had reset. No matter how long I looked at it, it always read 6:17. At first, I joked about it in my head, thinking maybe I had picked a date with a weirdo tech enthusiast who secretly hacked clocks. But then I noticed something else. No one else seemed to notice anything. The waiter brought food, smiled, left. Other tables were full of people eating, talking, laughing, but everything seemed muted like they were on a slightly different timeline. Nothing in the restaurant changed, and every glance at my phone brought the same time, same numbers, same tick of 6:17. I tried shaking it off. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I just wasn't paying attention. I scrolled through messages, emails, texts, anything to distract myself, but when I looked back at the clock in the corner, it was still stuck on the moment I'd arrived. My stomach sank a little, a feeling I couldn't explain. It wasn't fear exactly, not yet. It was unease, deep and cold. As the meal went on, I noticed other weird things. Every time he laughed, it was at the exact same moment as the last time. Every bite he took, every sip of wine repeated. I couldn't tell if it was him or me or the restaurant itself. The waiter came by 3 or 4 times, each visit identical, every detail perfectly copied, as if no time had passed at all. I excused myself to the bathroom, hoping a few minutes alone would reset my brain, give me some clarity. The hallway smelled faintly of garlic and wax polish. The mirror was cracked in one corner, a spiderweb pattern that didn't seem to change no matter how I looked at it. The lights buzzed, the same rhythm I'd heard at the table, the same quiet hum. When I came back, nothing had changed. Same table, same chairs, same half-empty wine glasses. I checked my phone again. 6:17. I tried to leave my seat, thinking maybe if I stepped outside, everything would reset, but the second my feet touched the floor, he grabbed my hand gently and smiled. That smile, that calm, familiar smile, and everything froze again. I tried to talk to him, explain that time seemed broken, but words felt useless. It was like they didn't travel across the table, like they existed only inside my head. He continued eating, continued laughing at my jokes even before I said them, perfectly on cue, and I realized then that maybe I wasn't imagining it. Maybe something was controlling the night, controlling me. The wine grew colder and colder in the glass with every sip, though I could swear I hadn't set it down long enough for that. The pasta never got eaten. The noodles didn't shrink, the sauce didn't disappear, and every time I reached for my fork, it was like it had been reset to the exact position it was in when the waiter first placed it. I started watching other tables. People around us moved slowly or sometimes not at all. Faces blurred together, blurred into the same expressions. One couple laughed, and the sound was perfect, constant, looping. Another table ordered food that never came. I felt trapped in this bubble, this perfect, repeating scene, and the panic I'd been holding in started to rise. I tried leaving again. I left the chair, walked to the door, and the handle was warm under my fingers. That made no sense. The handle shouldn't be warm. I pulled. Locked. I tried twisting it faster. Locked. I ran back to my table, heart hammering. He looked up, eyes calm, measured like nothing was wrong. My phone again, 6:17. I felt dizzy. Nauseated. My hands shook. I realized I didn't know how long I had been there. Maybe minutes. Maybe hours. Maybe longer. Every attempt to measure time failed. Every glance at the clock or my phone or even the waiter brought me back to the start. The night was endless. The restaurant, endless. And he sat across from me, smiling, calm, perfect. I tried distracting myself by talking to him, asking questions, but it didn't matter. He answered the same way, repeated himself sometimes without realizing it. The words looping like the time itself. I didn't know what he was doing, if he knew, if he controlled it, if he was even real, but I felt my mind starting to fracture. I thought about my phone battery. Maybe if I left it off, maybe if I powered it down, it would stop. I fumbled, dropped it, and looked again. 6:17. Same as always. The battery hadn't died, the screen hadn't gone black. Time hadn't moved. It was like it didn't exist anymore. I glanced around the restaurant desperately, trying to find a sign of normalcy. Nothing. Waiters, diners, lights, tables, everything frozen, repeating, constant. Even the candles on the tables seemed to flicker the same way over and over. I could almost count the beats of each flicker. Almost. I tried standing up, leaving, shaking him off. My legs felt heavy, leaden, and each step felt like moving through water. He didn't stop me, didn't touch me, didn't interfere. But every time I returned to the table, everything reset again, the glass of wine full, the pasta untouched, my phone back to the beginning. I realized then that maybe I couldn't leave. Not really. Maybe the date entrapped me in its own loop. Maybe the restaurant was a trap, or maybe he was. Or maybe I was the trap, and everything else just existed to remind me of it. I spent what felt like hours trying to convince myself to escape, to fight, to force something to change. But nothing did. Time refused to move, refused to acknowledge anything beyond the first moment. I couldn't remember what I had eaten, what I had said, what I had felt before sitting down. Only that moment. 6:17, the loop, him smiling perfectly across from me. Eventually, I stopped trying to escape. My mind went quiet, almost detached. I stared at the candle flickering between us, at his calm, measured movements, at my phone stuck in that one impossible moment. I didn't know how long I had been like that, sitting and watching, waiting for time to move. It never did. I still don't know if it was him, the restaurant, or something worse. All I know is that I can still see the date in my head, the exact moment I arrived, the first sip of wine, the flicker of the candle, the perfect, repeating smile across from me. 6:17. Over and over. I can feel it looping even now, thinking about it. I knew the date was going to be weird from the moment I saw him standing outside the little diner on Maple Avenue, adjusting his jacket like he'd been waiting for me forever. I tried to brush it off, thinking first dates are always awkward, but there was something about the way he stared, like he was trying to measure every part of me at once. That smile didn't make me feel welcome. It made my skin crawl a little. We sat down in a booth near the back, away from most of the other diners. The place smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet, the kind of smell that lingers in your clothes long after you leave. He asked me about work, school, family, all the usual stuff, but then he shifted. His questions became personal, precise, almost surgical. "What scared you the most?" he asked, and I laughed nervously, thinking he was trying to start a fun conversation. I said normal stuff: heights, spiders, dark rooms. But the way he leaned forward, eyes sharp, like he was taking notes in his head, made me stop mid-sentence. After that, the questions kept coming more specific. What about being alone in a small space? Or seeing something crawl where it shouldn't be? Or feeling watched when no one is there? Each time I brushed it off, laughed, tried to act casual, but I felt the first prickle of unease creeping up my spine. It started subtly. The lights above our booth flickered slightly when I mentioned the dark. A small shadow moved across the wall when I talked about spiders. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Maybe I was jumpy nervous. But then he smiled, that calm, too perfect smile, and said something that wasn't meant to be heard but sounded like an acknowledgement. That's when I realized he wasn't listening to me just like anyone else. He was listening to me like a predator, like he needed every detail. By the time the waiter brought our food, things were changing faster. The shadows around our table grew longer, curling like smoke when I said I hated closed spaces. A tiny spider crawled along the ledge above the booth, exactly where I could see it without it touching me. My heart rate spiked, and I forced myself to laugh, to act normal. He didn't react the way anyone else would. He just watched, calm, smiling like he had expected it. And then the air around me grew heavier, almost suffocating, as if the walls themselves were pressing in. The diner felt smaller, tighter, every movement echoing like I was underwater. My hands shook slightly, and I realized it was exactly what I feared the most: being trapped, completely alone in a confined space, with something I couldn't control happening around me. I tried to look around for other diners, for someone who could tell me this wasn't real, but they all seemed frozen, or maybe they were ignoring it. None of them noticed the shadows creeping closer, none of them noticed the spider. I felt completely isolated, like the universe itself had shrunk to this one booth, this one table, this one horrifying date. He asked more questions, casually, almost conversationally, like we were talking about the weather. What about feeling like someone is following you at night? The lights outside dimmed through the window, and the street lamp flickered like it couldn't decide if it should stay on. A faint movement in the corner of my eye made me turn, and I saw a figure pacing, always just at the edge of the glass, never fully there. I wanted to stand up, leave, get out, but my legs wouldn't move. He didn't touch me, didn't restrain me, but I felt like I couldn't leave. He smiled again, calm, measured, like nothing was wrong, like he was just continuing a casual dinner. But everything else around me was spiraling into my worst nightmares. I tried talking about something else, anything else, hoping it would stop, hoping he couldn't do this outside of his questions. But every word, every pause, every laugh I forced out seemed to trigger the next manifestation. I could see it clearly now. He wasn't just asking questions. He was testing me, mapping my fears, making them real around me. Every fear I admitted to, every hesitation became something tangible, something happening in real time. A sound came from above, a soft tapping, exactly the sound of dripping water in a dark basement, one of my irrational fears since I was a kid. I tried to laugh it off, tried to convince myself it was just the air conditioning or the old pipes, but the tap kept coming, perfectly measured, echoing just the way I imagined it in my nightmares. When I spoke about rats, a tiny one ran along the edge of the booth, never touching me but close enough that I could see the fur, the glint of its eyes. My pulse raced, and I realized I hadn't moved, couldn't move, even though I wanted nothing more than to get up and leave. He asked about fear of fire, casually like a conversation about dessert. The candle in the middle of the table flared suddenly, hotter, brighter, smoke curling around my face. I backed up slightly in the booth, and the flame danced exactly the way I had imagined it in my worst scenarios, threatening, alive. The worst part was how calm he remained. The server came by, paused, glanced at our table, but didn't react to anything abnormal. Everyone else in the diner seemed normal, oblivious, like they couldn't see the spider, the rat, the shadow, the candle flare. I was the only one trapped in this sequence, this personal horror show. By the time dessert arrived, I realized I couldn't tell what was real and what wasn't. Every movement, every flicker of light, every sound was perfectly tuned to my fears. I couldn't breathe properly, couldn't think straight. I kept trying to reason with myself, telling myself I was imagining it, but deep down, I knew this wasn't imagination. This was him. I tried standing up, leaving, but my body felt disconnected from me, like it belonged to someone else. He didn't stop me, but every step toward the door made the manifestations worse. Shadows grew darker, the spider moved faster. The figure outside the window stopped pacing and stared directly at me. I realized then that leaving wasn't going to help. It wouldn't stop him. He had already mapped every fear, embedded them into the environment, made them real around me. The diner, the people, the entire space was part of it now. There was no escaping. Eventually, I stopped trying to fight. I sat back down, hands shaking, eyes darting, heart hammering, and watched him continue eating, sipping wine, calm, measured. The candle flickered, the shadows stretched, the rat ran along the edge of the booth again, and I realized I had no control over any of it. It was all part of him, part of this carefully orchestrated nightmare. By the time we left, I was drained. My mind felt raw, exposed, as if every nerve had been pried open. Outside, the air was normal, the street quiet, the world normal, but I couldn't stop seeing it. Every shadow, every movement, every tiny thing that had happened inside that diner was burned into my mind. Even now, thinking back, I can see it all clearly. The tiny rat, the flaring candle, the spider, the shadowed figure outside, all perfectly aligned with what I had confessed, all perfectly orchestrated by him. I don't know how he did it, don't know if anyone else could see it, and I don't know if I'll ever forget it. But I remember every second of that date, every fear made real around me, and the way he smiled like it was just another ordinary dinner. I met her at a coffee shop downtown, the kind of place where the walls are covered in bookshelves and old vinyl records hang above the barista counter. I thought she was cute, friendly, and normal at first. There was something in her smile that didn't fit the space, like it belonged somewhere else entirely. I laughed at a stupid joke I made, and she laughed too, but it wasn't just a laugh. It was precise, like she had waited to laugh at that exact moment. We decided to take a walk afterward because she said she liked quiet streets with old houses, and I agreed, mostly because I didn't want the date to end yet. The air was damp and smelled faintly of wet asphalt and pine. The city had this foggy, late autumn vibe that made everything feel muted and slightly unreal. I noticed she was staring at me more than usual, not in a flirty way, but in a way that made me uncomfortable, like she was scanning every corner of my face, every subtle expression. She said something strange, almost casual, about how she could be whoever I wanted her to be. I laughed nervously, thinking it was just a line, some weird flirtation, but the way she held my gaze made me pause. I told her it was ridiculous and smiled, but my chest tightened, and I noticed she didn't smile back the way anyone else would. Instead, her face started to subtly shift, like her features softened and reformed, just slightly at first, and then more obviously. The first face that appeared was my best friend from high school. The laugh lines, the shake of the eyes, the tilt of the head. It was unmistakable. I froze. I told myself it was a trick of the light, the fog, maybe my imagination, but the streetlights illuminated her changing features too clearly to be a coincidence. She caught my reaction and smiled that same precise smile again, now looking more like my cousin than my friend. My stomach sank, and I tried to move to step back, but I couldn't. My legs felt heavy, like they were glued to the damp pavement. Each time I blinked, her face morphed into someone else I knew, my first crush, my old gym teacher, even the neighbor from across the street who always yelled at kids for skateboarding. Every face was perfect, exact, down to the smallest details, and it wasn't just mimicry. It carried the essence, the subtle quirks, the mannerisms I remembered from years ago. I could feel memories of them flicker in my mind, brief flashes like someone else's old Polaroid sliding past my consciousness. I wanted to ask her how she was doing this, but no words came out. Every time I tried, my throat tightened. She took a step closer and said she could be anyone I wanted, her voice soft, almost soothing. But the effect was the opposite. The more she spoke, the more faces came, cycling through everyone I'd ever known, friends, relatives, even strangers whose faces had stuck in my mind for no reason at all. The fog around us thickened, obscuring the street behind us. The city felt like it had vanished, leaving only her and the parade of faces. I started backing up, fumbling over wet leaves on the sidewalk. My heart pounded, and I realized I had no idea where I was going. Every time I tried to focus on something fixed, like a street lamp or the corner bakery, it warped, bending slightly as if reality itself was being reshaped around her. Her eyes, whichever face she wore at the moment, stayed locked on me, unblinking, patient, aware. I remembered the stories about people who could hypnotize you with gaze, but this was different. This was more than manipulation. She wasn't just holding my attention. She was rewriting my perception. Faces I remembered began to linger, moving at the edge of my vision when I closed my eyes, making me doubt what was real. My best friend's laugh, my cousin's smirk, my old teacher's sharp glare, they all felt present, like ghosts tethered to her will. She stepped closer, tilting her head, now wearing a face I couldn't immediately place but knew deeply. It was someone I had once seen in a photograph, someone who had vanished from my memory until this exact moment. My stomach twisted. Every face she became had a subtle animation, little movements that made them undeniably alive. A twitch of the lip, a blink, a slight shrug. And always beneath it all, the same smile that didn't belong to anyone I recognized, the true underlying her. I tried to pull out my phone, thinking maybe if I captured this on camera it would break the illusion, but the screen went black as soon as I raised it. When I looked up again, her face had shifted to my younger self, the version of me I hated and wish I could forget. I staggered back, hitting a tree trunk, and she stepped forward effortlessly. I realized I couldn't escape. Every familiar figure she became seemed to anticipate my moves, always staying one step ahead, always bending the space between us until there was nowhere left to run. A cold wind swept down the street, carrying the faint smell of damp hair and old perfume, and I felt dizzy, unsteady. I could see the faces overlapping now, morphing in layers, switching rapidly, each one carrying a fragment of memory or emotion that belonged to someone I knew. I tried to close my eyes, to shut it all out, but it only intensified. I could hear whispers in the shifting voices, laughter, murmurs, soft phrases I couldn't fully understand but felt personal, aimed at me. I ran blindly past familiar shops, trying to find a main street, a crowded intersection, anything to break her hold. But the fog clung to her, to me, and each step made her faces sharper, more detailed, more alive. I realized I wasn't running anywhere except deeper into the space she controlled. The city seemed to bend around her, alleys stretching impossibly long, buildings tilting, shadows falling wrong. Every reflection in a window or puddle showed a different face she could become, mocking me, taunting me with recognition. At one point, I tripped and fell into a shallow puddle, water spilling over my hands, soaking my sleeves. When I lifted my head, she stood above me, now a combination of several faces at once, features fused in ways that made my stomach churn. It was grotesque but familiar. I could pick out eyes, lips, noses, ears. People I had loved, hated, feared, missed. And still, beneath all of it, the same calm, unnerving smile, the constant awareness that this wasn't random. This was deliberate. I don't remember how long I stayed on the ground trembling, but eventually I got up and stumbled toward a busier street, thinking maybe crowds would break it. People passed by, heads down, faces absorbed in phones, rushing, and none of them noticed. She didn't need to. I could feel her presence, her gaze, her shifting identity, always attached to me, threading into my perception, and I realized it didn't matter if anyone else saw. It only mattered that I did. I reached the bus stop, panting, shaking, water dripping from my sleeves, and she stood across the street, watching, waiting, shifting through faces I hadn't even consciously remembered. The streetlights flickered over her, and her shadow stretched impossibly long, reaching toward me. I wanted to call someone, scream, run into traffic, do anything, but my body was spent, my mind fraying. She didn't move except to shift faces. The effect was enough. Eventually, I had no choice but to keep moving, to put as much distance as I could between us. The city felt alien, distorted, familiar streets twisting in wrong ways. Every reflection, every window, every glass surface threatened to remind me of what she could do, who she could be. And even as I escaped into a crowded area, I could feel her presence in the back of my mind, still shifting, still watching, still waiting for the moment I would be alone again. That night, when I finally got home, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing her, cycling through faces in the corner of my room, on the walls in my mind. I met him at this tiny cafe tucked into the corner of a street I usually avoid. It smelled like burnt coffee and old pastries, the kind of place you end up in by accident and stay because it's weirdly quiet. He was easy to talk to at first, charming in a casual way that made me think the date was going well. We laughed about stupid things, swapped stories about our jobs, and I was already thinking I might actually like this guy. It wasn't until later that I realized how wrong I was. We left the cafe around 11 at night, and I told him I'd call an Uber to get home. I had this odd sense of relief, thinking the date was over on a good note, but the relief disappeared almost instantly. I requested a ride, watched the car pop up on my app, and disappear. I assumed it was a glitch, so I requested another one. Same thing. A third, fourth, fifth. Each time, the car would show as arriving, then vanish. My stomach started tightening, and I tried to keep it casual. I glanced at him, hoping he might say it was a common app issue. He didn't. He smiled, calm and unnervingly patient, like he'd been waiting for me to notice. By the 10th ride, I was standing on the cracked sidewalk in front of the cafe, checking my phone repeatedly. The street was quiet, empty except for a few flickering streetlights. The air was cold, but not enough to notice until anxiety seeped in. I finally asked him why none of the rides were showing up. His response was slow, deliberate. He admitted he'd been canceling every ride I requested. My hands went icy. My voice froze somewhere in my chest, and I couldn't even form words. My mind scrambled. Why would anyone do that? How could he know exactly when I was trying to leave? The street felt suddenly smaller, corners bending, the empty city stretching in the wrong directions. I looked around, half expecting a normal car to appear, a normal person walking past, anyone to snap me out of this. But there was no one. Just him, calm, smiling, waiting. His eyes held this strange satisfaction, like he'd already planned this exact scenario for months. I could feel my heart hammering in my throat. I tried calling another ride silently, hoping he wouldn't notice, but before I could hit confirm, he reached over and grabbed my phone. I froze. He held it like it was a casual gesture, not a warning or a threat, but I felt my blood run cold. He didn't even look at the screen. I realized then that this wasn't about transportation. This was about control. I tried to step back, telling him I needed to leave, I needed to get home. He didn't move closer, not physically, but somehow the space between us tightened. I could feel it pressing against my chest, like the air itself had thickened. Every time I tried to walk toward the street, the shadows along the buildings seemed to stretch, stretching the distance I had to cover. It wasn't subtle. It was deliberate. The city had shifted. The streets were wrong. I didn't know how long it would take me to reach the main road. I pulled out my keys and held them in front of me like a weapon, but he didn't flinch. He smiled, watching me. I thought maybe if I pretended to be calm, I could reason with him, make him release me. But then he said something that made me freeze completely. He said he wanted to make sure I couldn't leave. Not because of me, not because he liked me, but because he wanted to see what I would do when trapped. The way he said it made my stomach turn. I realized that this wasn't a joke, not some strange flirting. He meant it. I scanned the street for anything. Another person, a car, a lit window, but there was nothing. Just empty storefronts, the occasional trash can rattling in a cold wind that hadn't been there before, and him, standing perfectly still, smiling. I couldn't tell if he was waiting or watching. Both, maybe. I tried to move, slow steps, fast steps, zigzagging down the sidewalk, but it didn't matter. Every attempt I made felt futile. He started talking about timing, about how he had done this before, how he knew exactly how to make sure a person stayed. His words were calm, controlled, but I couldn't hear them clearly. All I could focus on was the way the street seemed to stretch, the way every familiar corner looked foreign, the way he stayed perfectly in sync with me. I realized I had no escape unless he let me go. The thought made my chest tighten even more. I tried to pull my phone away, tried to call for help, but the signal kept dropping. Every time I thought I had a line, the screen went black, then came back as though nothing had happened. I was alone, and yet I wasn't. He was everywhere, in every reflection, in every shadow along the street. It was impossible to shake the feeling that he was not just next to me, but inside the city itself. I thought about running into a store, but every door I approached was locked. Windows didn't open. Even trash bins and fences felt like barriers I couldn't climb. The street seemed endless, looping back on itself in ways that didn't make sense. He didn't need to touch me. I could feel him controlling the air, controlling the edges of reality, controlling my options. My brain started spiraling, trying to find a way out, a loophole, anything. Hours passed, though I couldn't tell if it was minutes or days. I sat down on a curb, exhausted, holding my knees to my chest. He stayed a few feet away, always calm, always smiling, never saying a word. I noticed my reflection in a puddle, and for a second I didn't recognize myself. My hair was messy, my eyes wide and wild, but my reflection seemed thinner, stretched in a way that wasn't natural. He was doing this. He was shaping everything around me, bending time and space just enough to make me feel trapped, isolated, terrified. Eventually, I tried to reason with him again, to appeal to whatever humanity he had. I asked for my phone back, asked for a ride, asked for anything that could end this. He handed the phone back casually, but when I opened the app, it still said no cars available. I realized then that it didn't matter if I had a phone. He could cancel it, erase my options. The city had become his trap, and I was the only one caught inside. I started walking, slowly at first, hoping the streets would lead somewhere, anywhere, but every block brought me back to the cafe. It was impossible. No one else was there. No one was watching. It was like I had been erased from the rest of the world, and the only life left was his, and the way he wanted me to experience it. I spent what felt like hours wandering, looping, stopping, trying to make sense of it. My arms were sore from holding my phone, my legs aching from pacing, and my chest felt like it was being squeezed by invisible hands. He never moved from the middle of the street. He didn't even watch me now. He just stood there, letting me experience the trap, letting me understand that there was nothing I could do without him deciding it was allowed. Finally, I stopped, exhausted, leaning against a lamppost that flickered overhead. I realized that I couldn't rely on anyone else. There was no rescue, no intervention. The city had become his design, and he had every detail accounted for. I was nothing more than a participant in a scenario he had orchestrated perfectly. And when I looked back, he was gone. I don't know if he left or if he was never really there. All I know is the streets were empty, the fog settling into the corners, and my Uber still wouldn't come. I eventually made it home hours later, sweating, trembling, and the app still showed no cars available. I couldn't explain it to anyone, and I didn't try. I kept the curtains closed, lights on, doors locked. I never called another ride alone at night. I never met anyone from a dating app again without making sure there was someone nearby, and even then, I felt that presence lingering. He wasn't just a man. He was a rule in the world I hadn't understood until that night. The next time I saw that street, it looked normal. The city looked normal, but I knew it could turn again at any moment if he wanted it to. I thought I knew what first date nerves felt like, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened when she asked me to meet her family. It started out normal enough. We met at a small diner, grabbed coffee, talked about work, hobbies, and music. She laughed at the right times, leaned in, made it feel like we were on the same wavelength. She seemed sweet, normal, just someone I could see myself hanging out with again. And then she casually said she wanted me to meet her family. I didn't think much of it at first. Most people say that kind of thing after a few dates. But there was something in her tone, something insistent, like this wasn't a suggestion. It was a requirement. She lived a few miles outside the city in a quiet neighborhood of small houses lined up in neat rows. The sun was setting when we arrived, and the streetlights hadn't turned on yet, leaving the houses in a kind of warm orange haze. She led me to the front door of a modest house that looked normal at first glance. but there was a strange symmetry to it. Every window and every trim seemed unnaturally perfect. I shrugged it off. Maybe she was just particular about her house. The door opened and she started introducing me to her family. The first person was sitting at the table, an older woman knitting. I froze instantly because the woman looked exactly like her. Same hair, same eyes, same faint smirk. I thought maybe it was a coincidence, maybe a weird resemblance. Then she pointed to the next person, a younger girl helping with plates in the kitchen. Again, identical features. Then another, a middle-aged man in the living room reading a newspaper, saying face. My stomach twisted into knots. I tried to rationalize it, thinking maybe these were cousins or distant relatives who just happened to share strong family genes. But the more she introduced, the clearer it became. It wasn't possible. Each one looked like her at a different age. There were versions of her from childhood to elderly, all living, all moving, all smiling as if this was completely normal. I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight, my words trapped somewhere between disbelief and fear. I tried to focus on small details to ground myself, like the different hairstyles, the way they moved, subtle differences in clothing. But it was no use. Every tiny variation just confirmed the impossibility. This wasn't genetics. This was something else entirely, something planned. She led me through the rooms, showing me how each one lived. The oldest version, sitting in a rocking chair, had the same soft smile, the same eyes that seemed to look right through me. The youngest version, barely a child, stared at me curiously but without fear, which was even more unsettling. There was something about the way they all moved, the way they all looked at me, that made it clear they were waiting for me to notice, waiting for me to understand that I wasn't just meeting her family. I was being shown a collection, a spectrum of the same person stretched across time. I started to ask questions, but she kept guiding me forward, ignoring everything I was trying to say. Each room felt smaller than the last, the house twisting in ways that didn't make sense. Halt, which I thought I had passed were behind me again, doors leading back to the living room I had just left. I realized then that the house itself wasn't normal. It seemed to fold in on itself, like the structure was an extension of her. The family wasn't just in the house. They were part of it, part of her design. At one point, she stopped in front of a wall covered in photographs. Each one was her, but at different ages and different places, frozen in moments that seemed ordinary. School pictures, birthday parties, vacations. But none of the photos looked like they had been taken recently. Some of them were decades old. I noticed that the photos matched the people I had just seen in the rooms. It was like she had curated her entire existence into one space, a timeline of herself living out every moment. I felt like an intruder, a witness to something I wasn't meant to see. The more I walked through the house, the more I realized that no one else in the neighborhood seemed to exist. There were no cars on the street, no lights in other houses, no sounds except for the faint ticking of clocks and the soft, coordinated movements of the versions of her. I asked her if she ever went outside, if the other people in the world ever visited, but she just smiled, the same smile in every version of her face. She said that this was her world, that her family had always been this way. I couldn't tell if she meant literally or figuratively. I tried to think logically, tried to convince myself that I was seeing a trick, some kind of elaborate cosplay or people she had hired. But there was no explanation. The child version of her knew things I had only mentioned to the adult version seconds before. The older version reacted to things I hadn't done yet, predicting my movements as I walked down the hallway. Every piece of evidence I tried to cling to dissolved under the weight of impossibility. By the time we reached the final room, my sense of time had fractured. I couldn't tell how long I had been there, how many hallways I had passed, or how many versions of her I had seen. She led me to a small sitting area with a single chair in the center. The versions of her surrounded me silently, watching as I sat. My heart pounded so hard it hurt, my mouth dry. I realized that I wasn't just visiting her family. I was being assessed, measured, maybe even cataloged. She knelt in front of me, calm and smiling, the adult version again. She said something about making sure I understood the importance of family, the value of continuity. I didn't hear her clearly, I couldn't focus. All I could think about was the way every face in the room mirrored her, how every age, every version was present and aware. I wanted to leave, to run, but the house didn't let me. I felt trapped, like the walls themselves were alive and watching. Eventually, I found myself standing at the front door again, but stepping outside didn't feel like escape. The street was still empty, the sky dark. I looked back at the house, at the lights glowing in the windows, at the silhouettes of her family all watching. I realized then that leaving wasn't really an option. Whatever she was, whatever this collection of herself was, she could follow. She could extend herself through the world outside. The versions of her weren't confined to the house. They were her, and she could be anywhere. I stumbled back to my car, hands shaking, eyes darting to every window, every shadow. She didn't follow me, at least not immediately, but I knew it was only a matter of time. Every time I blinked, I half expected to see her face in the rearview mirror, or in the windows of the houses I passed. It was the same face, but older, younger, smiling, watching. I drove home without really paying attention to the road, my mind racing with the impossible images I had seen. I kept thinking about the child version, the teenager, the adult, the elderly version, all of them existing at once, all aware of me, all part of her. I couldn't stop replaying it, trying to make sense, trying to find a logical explanation, but there wasn't one. I got home, locked the doors, and sat on the couch in silence. I didn't check my phone, didn't try to call anyone, didn't want to risk looking anywhere. Every sound in the apartment made me jump, every shadow looked like her. I realized that I had been given a glimpse of something I wasn't meant to understand, and that even understanding it wouldn't help me. She had created a family of herself, and that family in some way was endless. I haven't contacted her since. I don't know if she still expects me to visit again, or if the versions of her are out there somewhere watching. I can't sleep without checking the corners of my room, without imagining her family in the shadows. Every reflection in a window, every passerby that catches my eye, I see her. Not just her, but all of them at every age. And I know that one day they might all be in the same room again, waiting for me to notice, to understand, to stay. I thought first dates were supposed to be awkward, maybe a little boring, with the usual small talk and fake laughs. That's what I expected when I agreed to meet him at that dim little bar downtown. I liked the place because it wasn't crowded, the music wasn't too loud, and the bartenders knew how to make a proper drink. I showed up early, like always, and grabbed a booth in the corner. The lighting was soft, flickering slightly from the neon signs outside, casting weird shapes across the floor. I sipped on water, scrolling through my phone to kill time, wondering if I had made a mistake agreeing to this. He arrived right on time, smiling, waving like we'd known each other for years. He slid into the seat across from me and started talking like we were old friends, which was weird, but also disarming. He seemed confident, charming, and I guess I let my guard down because he laughed at all the right moments and asked questions that felt personal but not invasive. Then he did it. He leaned back, crossed one leg over the other, and casually said he got me a drink. Not just any drink. He slid it across the table with this calm, casual smile, and I froze. I didn't order a drink yet. I hadn't even looked at the menu. And the drink he set down in front of me was exactly the way I always order. Ice exactly the right amount, a twist of lemon on the rim, a single drop of that one syrup I only add sometimes. I stared at it like it had just grown legs and crawled onto the table itself. I laughed nervously, trying to brush it off, thinking maybe it was some lucky guess. I mean, it was a pretty standard choice, right? But something about the precision, the way he slid it over like he knew exactly what I wanted before I did, made the hair on my arm stand up. I told him jokingly that I'd never met him before tonight, that he couldn't possibly know this. He just smiled, leaned in a little, and said he had been paying attention, that he remembered. Remembered? I realized then that he didn't mean tonight. The bar itself started to feel different after that. I noticed the lights flickering a little too rhythmically, like they were in sync with his breathing. The music seemed to pulse with him, not with the beat of the songs. I tried to focus on my drink, thinking maybe I just needed a second to breathe. But the closer I looked, the more I realized that the twist of lemon wasn't just a twist. The drop of syrup on the edge of the glass formed this tiny pattern, a shape that made my stomach knot. It wasn't random. It looked deliberate. Someone had made this for me perfectly, intentionally. I tried to shake it off, sipped the drink, and immediately noticed that the taste was right, exactly what I like, but then wrong. It was too perfect. Each flavor hit in a sequence only I would recognize. It wasn't a coincidence. Someone had studied me, memorized the tiny details I usually kept to myself. The thought made my hands shake a little as I set the glass down. He didn't notice, or maybe he did and didn't care. He continued talking, asking me about things I had never mentioned before tonight, Small quirks, the way I tilt my head when I laugh, how I tuck my hair behind my ear. Things no one should know. And the more he talked, the more I realized I didn't want the answer. Every word he said felt like he had been rehearsing for years, but not rehearsing the conversation, rehearsing me. I looked around the bar, hoping for some normalcy, some sign that this was just another night out, another stranger trying to impress me. But the patrons weren't looking at me the way people normally do. They weren't glancing at a first date girl or making small talk. They were staring, all of them, faces calm, eyes too steady, watching my reactions like I was part of some strange experiment. I shook my head, told myself I was imagining it, but the heaviness in the room pressed down on me anyway. He reached for my hand across the table and I froze. The touch was normal enough at first, warm, human. But then I realized it wasn't just holding my hand. He was adjusting the angle of my fingers, gently curling them in a way I always do without noticing. He was mirroring me, but with intent, and the idea that he could predict this, control it, made my chest tighten. I tried to make an excuse to leave, tried to tell myself I just needed air, but when I looked around again, the bar had changed. The exit doors seemed farther away. The lights overhead flickered, casting strange shadows along the walls, and I swear I saw the bartender's smile stretch just a little too wide when he refilled our glasses without us asking. Each pour was perfect, identical to the first, down to the last drip. It wasn't service anymore. It was precision. I wanted to leave, but every time I stood up, my knees felt heavy, the floor like it was sticking to me. I looked at him and he smiled, calm, unhurried, as if he had known I would try. I realized then that the drink wasn't the start of the date. The drink was the point. The moment where I understood that this wasn't a normal first date, that I had walked into something planned, something I couldn't explain. I asked myself if I was overreacting, if I was imagining it all, but then I noticed the pattern in the condensation on the glass. Tiny scratches along the rim formed letters, words almost imperceptible unless I stared close enough. I know you. My throat went dry. I dropped the glass, and it shattered on the floor, liquid pooling, the letters didn't disappear. They were in the puddle, floating like ink, perfectly legible. I tried to step back to leave, but the puddle seemed to pull my gaze, and I realized I couldn't look away. He leaned back, watching me. The calm in his posture made everything worse. No one else in the bar reacted. No one even glanced at the broken glass. It was like I was the only one in the world who had noticed, and maybe I was. I tried to leave again, stumbled toward the door, and when I pushed it open, the street outside wasn't there. The bar had become endless walls of tables, booths, and lights, stretching in every direction. Every patron stared at me the same way, eyes unblinking. He followed slowly, not hurried, just watching, smiling like this was a game I had no chance of winning. I ran back into the booth, desperate to hide, to disappear. He didn't chase. He just slid into the seat opposite me, calm, collected, holding another drink. I knew immediately it was my order again, perfectly made, waiting for me, like he had been expecting me to break, like he had rehearsed this moment too. I didn't take it. I couldn't, but I couldn't look away either. The bar, the patrons, the drink, him, it all seemed to pulse in a rhythm I recognized subconsciously. My favorite songs, the little patterns in the way I always walk, the way I always sip water before a meal. He knew them all, and now so did everyone else here. Hours must have passed, or maybe seconds. I don't know. Time felt wrong, like the second I blinked. I was back at the start. The same drink appeared again, the same bar, the same calm smile, and I realized I wasn't meant to leave. Not yet, maybe not ever. I had stumbled into something meticulously designed, something that knew me better than I knew myself, and I was trapped in the first date forever. I don't know if he's still out there watching. I don't know if he ever leaves, or if the bar is a construct, a loop, a place only I can feel. I do know that every time I think about a drink, my order, my habits, I see that bar, see his calm smile, and remember the way precision can be terrifying. The drink wasn't an invitation. It was a warning, and I was too late to heed it. I never thought a first date could feel like stepping into a nightmare so slow it crawls under your skin before you even notice. I met him at this little Italian place off a side street, the kind with checkered tablecloths and candles that were more for ambience than light. I was nervous but trying not to show it, sipping water and waiting for him to show up. The place was quiet, not too many people, just enough chatter and clinking dishes to make it feel normal. He arrived a little late, smiling like he had something up his sleeve, and I felt that weird mix of excitement and caution. We sat, ordered, and started talking about all the usual first date stuff. Work, favorite movies, stupid little things we like to do on weekends. He had this charm, easy to follow, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was studying me in ways that went beyond a casual first date. I tried to ignore it, thinking it was just my overactive imagination, and focused on the pasta in front of me. The night went by smoothly enough we laughed, and for a moment I thought maybe I had misjudged him. Then the check came. I reached for it, planning to split because that's how I always do first dates. I wanted to keep it casual, not give him any reason to think I was too impressed or too invested. But when I opened the receipt, my stomach dropped like I'd just been punched. There in the corner, printed clearly under the total, was my name. That alone was weird enough. Most restaurants don't ask for names on split checks. But right under it, there was another line I couldn't process at first. A date. Not today, not a random line item, but a date for tomorrow. And next to it, in the same font as the total, it said death. My heart stopped. I blinked, thinking maybe I was reading it wrong, some joke, a glitch in the system. I flipped the receipt over, looked for something else, a warning, a note, anything to explain it, but it was blank. Just my name and a date that didn't make sense. I looked up at him. He was watching me, calm, unhurried, a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. He didn't say anything, just sat there like he knew I'd find it, like he had been waiting for me to see it. The restaurant around us went quiet for a moment, or maybe my ears just stopped working. I could hear the clinking of silverware in the background, but it felt distant, unreal, like I was watching everything through water. I tried to laugh it off, tried to convince myself I was imagining it, that it had to be some mistake, a printer error, some kind of joke. But the weight of it pressed down on me. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone, thinking maybe I could call someone, check the date, something. And as I did, I noticed it. The waiter who had brought the check lingered too long at the next table staring. Not glancing, staring. And every other person in the restaurant was looking at me too, faces blank, eyes locked, unblinking. It was like I'd walked into some private show, and I was the only performer. I tried to hand the receipt back, pretending to be casual, but my fingers trembled too much. He reached across the table, taking my hand lightly, almost teasingly. His touch was normal, warm, but I could feel the tension behind it, the knowledge that he had orchestrated this. My brain kept going over the possibilities, over and over. How did he know my name? Why tomorrow? What was this supposed to mean? I wanted to leave, but my body refused to cooperate. I tried to pay, fumbled with my wallet, my fingers slipping on bills and cards, and he didn't help. He didn't even comment. He just sat there, calm, watching, like he was letting the moment sink in. The longer I stared at that date on the receipt, the more I felt the air thicken, like it was pressing against my chest. My mind was spinning, trying to rationalize. Maybe it was a coincidence, maybe a system glitch, maybe something else. But everything about him, the way he smiled, the way he watched, the way the restaurant seemed to focus only on us, made it impossible to think clearly. I finally managed to step out of my seat, receipt in hand, trying to shake it off. But the lights of the restaurant didn't change. The door didn't feel right. Outside, the street looked normal, but the noise was muted. The city sounds too distant. I turned back to look at him, and he was still there, still smiling, as if nothing had happened. But I knew something had. Something I couldn't name, something that couldn't escape. I walked toward my car, trying to rationalize, telling myself that the receipt had to be a joke, a coincidence, that I was overthinking. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. The air around me felt heavier, like the night itself had changed. I checked my phone again, and for a moment, the date flashed on the screen like a warning. Not just any date, the same one on the receipt, highlighted in a way that made my stomach knot. I drove home slowly, eyes darting to every shadow, every parked car, every streetlight that flickered too long or too short. The city seemed wrong, like it was tilted just enough to make me feel uneasy, just enough to make me question reality. My apartment building looked normal, but the hallways were darker than usual, and the faint echo of footsteps behind me made me jump every time I moved. I knew they weren't real, or maybe they were, I couldn't tell anymore. I kept thinking about the receipt, about the way it had his handwriting, or rather the printer's, but the way it listed me, my life, a date that should never have been there. The way he had orchestrated the entire night, every little detail from the conversation to the pasta, the wine, the lighting, the way the waiter lingered. It wasn't just a first date, it was a map, a countdown. By the time I got inside my apartment, I was shaking too much to think straight. I locked the door, triple checked the windows, and sat on the couch with the receipt in my lap staring at it. My brain wouldn't stop running scenarios, none of them good. The calm smile, the way he had watched me, the way everything had been too perfect, too orchestrated. It wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. Hours passed, but I didn't sleep. Every sound in the building made me flinch. Every flicker of light seemed to echo the restaurant. I kept the receipt in front of me, like a shield, like a warning. And when the night bowled into morning, I realized the date was coming closer, and I couldn't escape it. I couldn't explain it, couldn't reason it away, and I knew he was out there somewhere, calm, waiting, watching, knowing that I had seen it and that I was thinking about it. By the time morning hit, I felt hollow. The receipt was still there in my hands, and the words seemed sharper now, etched into my brain. I thought about calling someone, anyone, to tell them, to make it real, to make it stop, but every number I dialed sounded wrong, every voice on the other end too distant, too calm, too normal. I realized I wasn't just alone in my apartment. I was alone in a world that had shifted just for me, a world that now revolved around that date and the shadow of him. I didn't know if he had the power to make it happen, if it was some sick prediction, or if it was a threat that only worked if I believed it. I didn't care. The point was, I couldn't get away from it. The receipt wasn't just a slip of paper. It was a statement. It was a countdown, and I was stuck with it. I haven't gone out today. I haven't answered my phone. I haven't even touched food. All I can do is stare at that paper and watch the hours tick down toward tomorrow. The name on the receipt is mine. The date is tomorrow. And I don't know what will happen when that day arrives, but I know I'll see him again. I know he's still out there somewhere, smiling, watching, and waiting for the time to come. I thought I had met him online. That's how these things usually start, right? A few messages back and forth, some memes, vague interests, and then the usual want to meet up kind of vibe. I liked the way he wrote. The jokes landed just right, and I told myself I'd keep it casual. First dates are low stakes, I figured. You talk, you eat, you leave if it's weird. But I didn't know how much a first date could twist reality until that night. I remember stepping out of the subway, the city buzzing around me, the smell of wet asphalt after a light rain, the kind that makes everything smell sharper than usual. He texted, said he was already at the cafe, and I walked the few blocks trying to calm the nerves. The cafe was small, corner lit, not busy at all, and I remember thinking it was the kind of place that felt safe. Cozy. Nothing about it screamed danger. I remember him standing there when I walked in, smiling in that way that makes your chest tighten and your stomach do flips. We hugged, sat down, and started talking about the usual stuff. The boring first date stuff. Movies, favorite foods, some music. Then, after a few minutes, he said something that made my chest drop, though I laughed at the time because it felt weirdly charming. He said he loved first dates because they never remember the last one. At first, I thought he meant it as a joke about dating in general, about the fleeting nature of people you meet. I laughed harder than I should have. But then he smiled, and it wasn't funny anymore. I remember finishing my coffee, but I don't remember ordering it. I remember sitting down, but I don't remember walking into the cave. The world had this odd hum, like a record stuck halfway between two speeds. I glanced at him, trying to figure out if he noticed my pause, my weird lag in awareness, but he just kept talking, smiling. I tried to explain it in my head, that maybe I was tired, that maybe I had zoned out while walking over, that my brain was just slow. But then I realized something worse. I couldn't remember leaving my apartment that evening either. Not packing a bag, not locking the door, not even walking down the hall. It was gone, like a clean erasure from memory. The words he had said settled in like a cold weight. First dates don't remember the last one. And now I couldn't remember the first steps of this one. My coffee cup felt suddenly heavy. The hum of the room became louder, sharper, like a ringing in my head that wasn't real, but was too real to ignore. I wanted to ask him if he knew what he'd done, but my tongue felt glued to the roof of my mouth. I remember noticing the other patrons at the cafe for the first time. They weren't watching, not yet, but there was something off about them. Their movements seemed slightly delayed, like they were a second behind reality. A hand reached for a sugar packet, but the packet stayed still for too long before moving. A woman sipped from her mug, but the ripple in the liquid didn't match the movement. My stomach twisted. I tried to shake it off, thinking I was imagining things, but the feeling in my gut told me I wasn't. He leaned forward, closer than he had before, and said something that made my stomach drop further. I don't remember the exact words, but the feeling it left was undeniable. He knew exactly what he was doing, knew the kind of fear that could creep in when your own memory betrayed you. And the longer I sat there, the more I realized that time was bending. I glanced at my phone to check the time, but the screen flickered, refused to load the lock screen properly. The numbers jumped back and forth like static. I had no idea what time it was, or how long I had been there. I remember trying to get up once. I think I did, but my legs refused. My arms moved, but they felt like they were moving through water. The cafe lights seemed to dim and brighten in unnatural pulses. Shadows stretched too long across the walls, and through it all, he kept talking, smiling, completely unaffected by the chaos that had taken over my senses. I remember reaching for the door at one point, trying to leave, and it felt farther away than it should have. The hallway of the cafe seemed to stretch, like someone was tugging it just out of reach. My hands pressed against the handle, and it didn't move like normal. It resisted. I pulled harder, and I swear the door seemed to shudder in place, laughing at my effort. I think I blacked out for a few moments. I don't know for how long. When I came back, I was sitting across from him again, the coffee untouched in front of me, my hand wrapped around the mug as if it had always been there. He smiled that same slow smile, and the words echoed in my mind. First dates never remember the last one. And now I couldn't remember even arriving. I looked around. The cafe was empty. Not the kind of empty you expect when everyone leaves at closing time, but a heavy, unnatural empty. Chairs arranged neatly, silverware set perfectly, the hum of the fridge in the corner too loud. My own breathing sounded alien. The smell of coffee lingered, but it didn't match the taste of what I'd sipped before. And yet I had the cup in my hands, steaming, heavy, and real. I tried to stand again. This time I succeeded, but the world felt wrong beneath my feet. The floorboards creaked at odd intervals. Every step made me feel like I was sinking into something unseen. I reached for the door, expecting to burst out and find the normal street outside. But when I opened it, the city was still there, but distorted. The lights were wrong, the cars moved in unnatural arcs, and the people walking past had faces that flickered, not fully formed. I turned back to look at him. He was still seated at the table, smiling, calm, as if he had been waiting for me to notice. And in that smile, I could see the echo of all the first dates he had taken. Every person who had sat across from him and forgotten the moment, the room, the arrival, the very fact they had left their apartment to meet him. I felt it press against me, that same weight of erased memory, and I knew I was just the latest in a long line. I tried to leave again, running this time, but the streets shifted beneath me. Buildings twisted just enough to make me feel trapped, corners too sharp, alleys too narrow. I passed the cafe once more, the same cozy corner place, lights flickering, and through the window I saw the chair where he sat, empty for a fraction of a second before he appeared again, calm, smiling. I stumbled into my apartment, locked the door behind me, and checked my phone. No messages, no calls, nothing that made sense. The city outside sounded normal again, but I knew better. I knew what he had done. I had no memory of leaving the cafe, no memory of walking over, no memory of the first steps that night. And I could feel the edges of those memories fraying even now, slipping further into nothing. I haven't slept. I keep thinking about the cave, the coffee, the smile, the words about first dates never remembering. Every time I close my eyes, I see myself walking into that cave, see myself sit down across from him, see him smile that same slow smile. And then I wake up and I can't remember getting there. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's done it countless times before. And now I'm stuck, just another first date in the endless line of people who can't remember, who will never remember, except in these moments where the memory flickers and whispers like a warning I can't follow. Tomorrow I don't know if I'll wake up remembering him at all, or if I'll wake up and already be there again, coffee cup in hand, the first steps erased, a smile waiting, calm, and endless. I didn't think much about it at first. The date started normal enough, the kind of awkward, cute first date that makes you laugh nervously and hope the other person isn't going to talk about their ex the whole time. I met her at a small diner on a quiet street, one of those places with red vinyl booths and neon signs buzzing just loud enough to make the air feel alive. I thought I knew what first dates were supposed to feel like: stiff, a little forced, and over in an hour or two. I had no idea what this one was going to do to me. I remember walking in, the smell of coffee and fried eggs hitting me immediately, and seeing her already there, sitting in the corner booth. She smiled when I approached, the kind of smile that made your stomach flip, and I thought maybe tonight wouldn't be terrible. She didn't get up when I sat down. She just gestured to the menu, and I laughed because it felt like a weird formality, like we were pretending to follow some ritual I didn't understand yet. The conversation started normal. She asked about my work, hobbies, music, and I answered, feeling the tension in my shoulders slowly relax. But there was something in her eyes, a glint that made me uneasy without knowing why. She wasn't just listening. She was measuring me, watching every little gesture I made, like I was under a microscope. I tried to ignore it, chalk it up to first date nerves, but the longer I looked at her, the heavier that weight felt. Somewhere around dessert, she asked me an odd question. I remember it clearly because it didn't fit the flow of the conversation. She asked me what I would do if someone else took the life I was living and walked away with it like it didn't belong to me. I laughed nervously, thinking it was some weird philosophical thing. But the look she gave me froze my laugh halfway, the kind of look that makes you aware of the pitch of your own heartbeat. I excused myself to the bathroom, hoping a few minutes away would reset my nerves. That's when I started noticing strange things. The lights flickered in unnatural patterns, the air felt heavy, and the reflection in the mirror wasn't quite right. It looked like me, but not exactly. My eyes seemed wider, my skin somehow paler, my movements slightly delayed. I shook my head, thinking maybe I was just tired or imagining things, and went back to the booth. When I returned, she was still sitting there, calm, smiling that same unreadable smile. I sat down, but the moment I did, I realized something else. My hands didn't feel like mine. They were mine, yes, but the weight and the texture of them felt alien. I tried to move them in ways that were natural, but my fingers didn't respond the way I expected. She watched me adjust my grip on the fork, like she knew exactly what I was thinking. The rest of the meal passed in a blur. She asked questions that seemed normal on the surface but felt like tests. What I would do if a friend betrayed me. How I would react if someone took my job or my apartment. She smiled softly each time I answered, and I started to notice a pattern. Every time I felt confident in my answer, every time I thought I was in control, she nodded like I had passed something invisible, a checkpoint I didn't know I was reaching. By the time the check arrived, I felt exhausted, like I'd been run through some strange maze. She picked it up before I could, slid it across the table, and said something that made my blood run cold. She thanked me for passing the test. The words were calm, polite, but they carried a weight I couldn't ignore. My brain refused to process it at first. Test. Me? I didn't know what she meant, and the diner around us seemed too normal, too ordinary for the sentence to make sense. I got up to leave, trying to shake off the unease, but my body didn't follow my thoughts. My legs felt heavy, and my movements seemed delayed, like I was dragging a shadow behind me. She smiled again, small and satisfied, and waved as if saying goodbye to a guest at the end of a show. I tried to speak, to ask her what she meant, but the words wouldn't come. My voice was gone before I even realized it. I stumbled out of the diner, streetlights casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward me with intent. I reached my apartment and collapsed on my bed, hoping that sleep would reset everything. That's when I noticed something impossible. My phone was dead, but the notifications were still on the lock screen. Messages from friends asking if I was okay. Texts from the diner confirming reservations I hadn't made. The last one made my stomach drop. A message from her saying good night and congratulations. I tried to make sense of it, but I couldn't. I drifted into sleep, exhaustion overtaking fear, and woke up the next day to a sound that didn't belong to me. I was breathing differently, my throat wasn't mine, and when I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize the face staring back. Not fully. It was me, but someone else's eyes were in the sockets, someone else's expression frozen over my own. The phone vibrated on the nightstand. A calendar reminder popped up. First date with her tonight. Not in the future tense. Today, the same date, at the same diner with my body. Someone else was about to walk in and take my place, using me as their vessel for another night, another test I couldn't escape. I panicked, but my hands didn't respond. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't stop it from happening. I realized then what had happened. The test wasn't for her. It wasn't about passing or failing in the ordinary sense. It was about control. Passing the test meant being replaced. My life, my body, my identity, just a vessel for the next person. And she was outside it all, smiling, calm, collecting whatever it was she wanted from each encounter. The day stretched endlessly. I watched from inside my own body as the other person approached the diner, moving in the rhythm of my steps, my posture, my gestures. Each motion was mine but not mine, a puppet moving across the world I had once walked freely. The diner was waiting, the booth empty, the coffee steaming, the neon signs buzzing that familiar, meaningless hum. She sat there, calm, waiting to start the ritual all over again. I tried to scream, to push, to resist, but it was useless. My body obeyed, my mind trapped behind a glass wall I couldn't break. And as the diner door opened, as the new version of me approached, smiling nervously like all first dates do, I realized the truth. The date never ended. Passing the test meant the cycle continued. There was no way out, no exit. Only the endless loop of first dates, bodies borrowed, identities erased, and a woman smiling at the center of it all. The last thing I remember before the diner swallowed the new me completely was the smell of coffee, the neon glow reflecting in eyes that weren't mine, and her calm, satisfied smile. And then it started over.